will definitely happen in some specific cases, but I just don't see it having the big global effect that we imagine. I think it's just going to get too much human mischief in it before.
The only challenge with the human
Scott,
mischief, Scott, is that the legal process takes a long time. And time is of the essence. The challenge is we don't have a regulatory framework. We don't have legal frameworks around this. And it's not really just copying Dilbert. It's coming up with enough of a difference that unless you have some sort of intellectual property around any comics that have any of those similar features, you really don't have a leg to stand on, just respectfully.
Yeah, I think I agree that it'll take a long time to develop a legal framework, but it might take a short time for lawyers to say stop doing that until we figure out.
By the way, this is where blockchain comes in again. My hope is to get rid of lawyers. And I believe that universal truths, or at least a universal truth that can then be vetted for its truthfulness, is how these things, like, I don't see them separate. I see everything that everybody's saying gets hedged by universal truths or universal truths of information that are either true.
But then Fiji, you've got
what is truth?
And exactly, and you've got the Oracle problem, which I don't want to go down a blockchain discussion, which I think it solves a lot of problems. You do have the Oracle issues that who decides what the truth is, that then becomes immutable. But going back to Scott, I've got a few questions for you. AGI, jump in before I ask my questions. AGI, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. So I think the solution is it's just like the industrial revolution. So what was important then was to own the means of production. So the people that owned the means of production becomes very wealthy. In that case, we want everybody. We want all of the people to own the means of production. And what are the means of production? How do we get them? You get them with decentralized AI, decentralized AGI. So you create, for example, AI agent NFTs.
We already have
on the blockchain.
Yeah, but we're also gonna have a massive robot issue, and I'm imagining that people will finance and own their own robot and be responsible for maintenance and making it go to work and do what it needs to do. So it could be that everybody becomes a capitalist, but the capital that they own is their first robot.
I mean, Scott, one of the large issues I have with this, or something of a point of concern, is, and I think you alluded to it in one of your posts, you said, ChatGPT lied, but essentially what you're seeing is certain iterations of ChatGPT where there is biases. Now, when you've got humans basically coding these things, there is biases, and now when it's going to basically permeate society in such a significant manner, you're essentially going to have, again, a more a situation, an accelerated situation where humans become docile and they're relying on these type of mechanisms or information. They rely on these kind of things for information, and so essentially you're once again going back to a scenario where you control the narrative.
Do we not already rely on Google search to tell us what facts are?
Not really, because right now what you do is you rely on Google.
We do. But the issue is that Google search still needs human input. It displays human input, whereas eventually AI will no longer need human input. I think that the main difference here is, and what differentiates it to other technological evolutions, and disagree, Sulaiman, if you want to, but what differentiates it is that for once, humans will eventually no longer be necessary at all.
So with me, why it's different is when you use Google, you'll put a search in, you'll get a variety of articles, and if you search enough, you'll get enough articles or enough information that gives you kind of a broader perspective. It won't just be one narrative or one thought. I accept that Google does censor to an extent, but you still have this mechanism to find a wide range and depth and breadth. When it comes to ChatGPT, and people's usage of it, essentially what happens is just as
it comes to conclusions from that all information. It concludes on your behalf. It does the research on your behalf and comes to a conclusion on your behalf. Okay.
Exactly.
But
Just
these
look at
models
how
are
you
still
use it,
Hold
Mario.
on.
You literally, whenever when we're on these spaces, you put in like the
Man,
question,
chat.
and you're
Yeah,
like,
when I
guess what, guys?
bro, I
Yeah.
became an expert in everything thanks to Chat GPT, allowing me to moderate the spaces. So, but Susan,
But that's the problem.
let's see.
But isn't that the problem? You're not an expert, but you assume that ChatGPT is
Let's not
right.
take
And
let's not taking jabs. We're getting into a good discussion now. Let's take it easy. Susan, can you please
You know, one
push back?
thing.
Hold on, Susan, I just want Susan to push back on this point just to balance it out. Susan.
Yeah, I see this as a phenomenon of right now there's this gap in education about the limitation of these models, right? And the reason why we're so fearful and that we are extrapolating to replace humans entirely, or that these are ultimately facts issued by this model, that it's already conclusive, it's just coming from a perspective of not knowing that these are probabilistic machines, right? These are things, if you prompt it just subtly differently, it gives a completely different output. Right. So not having that education or this background on like the technology powering this, that's why we have this current mismatch of expectations of prescribing more meaning than there actually is to these models. If we were to, if your assumption is that we will remain docile and uninterested in the actual technology here, and that we'll never be educated in the limitations here, then perhaps that runaway future can happen. But I see that as really we're at this intersection where suddenly this AI model is deployed in mass to the world without the world being properly educated on the fact that this is a model trained on the entire internet, and suddenly compressing all that information. Now I call it memorization as an oversimplification, but really at the current technology right now, it's a limit of 32K context
But
window,
Susan,
right? So
that's the
the
point I was about to
32K
ask you about, Susan.
token, yeah,
Which is,
yeah.
sorry, I just wanted to, because I feel like you keep speaking from where we are
I
right
was going to
now.
push back against that as well. Like Susan, like our concern
Yeah, so
is
reinforcement learning.
where we are right now, and Danish keep add to what I'm about to say. But where we are right now is not the
By the way,
concern. Danish.
Yeah, so
Mario,
the challenge is
Hold on,
isn't there
also
something
Fiji.
that we
beautiful?
have.
Fiji.
One
Hold
second.
on, bro.
Isn't there something beautiful? Just 1 second. Isn't there something beautiful in the fact that our value will be based on our humanity, on the parts that can't be replicated? I think that's. I
Yeah,
mean,
but that
Phygital, you're also
that
assuming.
list of things
Yeah,
that can't be
you're also
replicated is getting
assuming
smaller and smaller and smaller.
exactly.
Like
No,
It's
no,
not about it being
I agree
replicated
with
per
Phygital.
se.
I agree with Phygital. I don't think it's smaller. It's smaller if you look at it from a point of quantity. But if you look at it from a point of quality, what makes one human is a
So
significant
I will push back,
factor
Sulaiman, and
compared to,
I'll tell
for
you,
example, a major one of that is consciousness. Go ahead, Janish.
there's something very specific happening also. We are all looking at the large language models and it's searching through the internet and and then connecting through these plugins to browse the internet faster and faster. But the thing that we're not thinking about, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people within the space are, which is the reinforcement learning with human feedback. Susan, this has been the fastest adoption of any new technology ever. That means that they are getting a ton of information, a ton of human feedback. And Susan, can you imagine that let's say 10 years from now, which seems like a very long time, but let's say 10 years from now, the technology is going to be exponentially better, just like the computer or the internet or any other technology that got better with human interaction. Do you agree with that supposition?
Yes, but I think I want to push back on the fact that what exactly is the quality of this feedback that it's getting, right? Is it through a 5-minute long message back and forth about, what code should you write? Is it trying to edit your story to make it a little more interesting? Like, what exactly is this feedback that we're so terrified of?
So the feedback is the human response, and that's what I'm trying to say. Ultimately, the thing that is the most concerning about this is that it can pretend to ask the questions that you would ask, especially with these agents that are now coming out. They can learn your behavior just like everything else on the internet has. As they learn your behavior, they can emulate you. It's an 80-20 issue. This is the challenge. We all always focus on what makes us
Imitate,
uniquely
Dr.
human.
Danish, I would use the word imitate rather than emulate.
Yeah, imitate. That's a better word. You're absolutely right. It can imitate your likeness. It can convince your family member that it's you. It can, I posted up in the nest, how it can make deep fakes looking and acting exactly like Donald Trump Jr. These are the things that are actually more concerning in the short term. And also on top of that, if you can start doing these things, it can actually lead to dire consequences for humanity. And I think that's what we're not talking about, is that we don't have a regulatory framework. We don't have legal frameworks. We don't have corporate frameworks. For example, as what Scott was talking about, we don't have a framework to protect Scott from losing, from somebody just learning everything about Dilbert and making a competing version and essentially taking the idea and running with it. There are a lot of like core
But
issues that we're acting like don't exist.
Dr. Danish, what you're saying is accurate. I mean, but also what you've got is this scenario. So, for example, now we know that Elon Musk and a few others wrote that open letter to basically say that, look, we do need regulation, we do need some kind of control, things are out of control. And I totally understand that argument. It makes a lot of sense and we need that. The counter to that argument is, as you know, that you've basically got rivals in other countries who are not going to hold back. And that's something you care about a lot as well, isn't it, Dr. Danish? So how do you balance...
It's like
something which is important ethically, it is, and it is very important because the risk of it going down. But then we know other countries that don't have the same level of...
Yeah, because I think, Danish, the concern that you have is kind of limiting it to the US, because if you start to constrict it within the US, then you've got other countries that are also leveraging the same technology. And that's where you go back to the issue we talked about. I can't remember which speaker that was on here earlier that compared AI to nuclear weapons. Like, hey, you have a nuclear weapon, I'm going to have one too, just because you have one, even though I don't think they should exist. And then in this case, like if we regulate AI and kind of limit its potential here in the US or in the West, then you're kind of giving an advantage to China and other countries that may not put these same limitations.
And I have to also bring up that there are some convergence of technologies that are occurring. I'm not as concerned about robotics yet, because I think robotics is still a little bit further away than people think it is. But when it comes to technologies like CRISPR and mRNA technology, there's so much going on right now all at once that allows you to be able to, CRISPR technology allows you to be able to put together a string of things and make it into something really scary. Those are the things that I'm incredibly worried about, which AI, again, Susan is right. It does take these types of tasks and augment them, but that can actually be detrimental to society. We're already dealing with a world where it's post-truth and technology is converging at such a rapid pace. AI is the ultimate enabler of this transition, and we're not ready. We're just not ready.
To Susan's point, you just need a 99% accurate imitation of a human bioterrorist to conduct a lot of real bioterrorism.
I guess my point here is that 99% is really hard to reach, right? Like,
do you think we'll reach it, Susan? Do you think we'll reach it in 15 years' time? What do you think, Susan? I know we can't predict, but do you think it's a plausible expectation or no?
Well, so I guess at that point, can we improve identification by then, right? Can we, like, right now, I think we're operating on the assumption that we still will somehow not build any guardrails for detecting who is human, who isn't, right? That, somehow we'll be flooded with spam and nobody can control it.
But does it then, Susan, does it matter though? Does it eventually matter if it's human or not? If would they be good quality robots or bots versus spammy, crappy bots?
Well, I guess then I can put the question back, like, what does it mean to be human? Maybe this goes back to our religion.
That goes back to whole Phygital's discussion, and him and Sulaiman him and Phygital will go on forever about this. But this is where...
Isn't this turning into a discussion instead about prevention versus firefighting, right? Like we talked about, this is just going to become the next version of vulnerability management and zero-day exploits. And as far as how accurate these systems will get, right? Like, I mean, sure, that's a debate. There's like this whole debate happening in academia today about like, is next token prediction resulting in these models building some semblance of, understanding of the real world, or on the other extreme, are they just sort of like bullshit machines? And I don't think that matters, right? Like, I think to your point too, Mario, what you were saying earlier, like, there's going to be a convergence of these systems and these things are going to get stacked on top of each other, right? So like Elon at Tesla is building what they call this real world AI thing, right? These are systems that perceive, understand, and act in the real world, right? And they're probably doing the largest scale deployment of this type of in the wild learning with the Tesla fleet. You talked about the reinforcement learning that's happening with ChatGPT. So whether there's some holy matrimony between like an AI anchored in the real world with these LLMs and that, achieves perfect precision and recall, that's almost like besides the point, in my opinion. The real point here is like, this is going to be an immense amplification of human intelligence on good and bad. I do want to go back to the discussion that was happening that Danish brought up and even Scott about like, what does this mean for jobs, right? Like, sure, a bunch of roles get eliminated, but the creative canvas is an interesting discussion in itself. So let me pose this to the group, right? Like, we've seen a bunch of trends evolve in creation, right? We're talking the trend from, just like film digitization to frickin' YouTube to TikTok. Like, painstakingly rendering things overnight to game engines that do this stuff in real time. And so now, while new tech is absolutely going to supercharge the creation for these existing mediums, right? Like you're going to get a bunch of like dribble on the internet, but that will make it so like the like sort of the pure like the more awesome content will rise to the top. But my question is, do we really think consumption mechanisms will stay static? Like, aren't humans just amazing at conjuring up newer, more complex canvases for our creativity to keep us occupied? Sure, we can have the debate of whether this change is going to happen, faster than we can keep up with it. But isn't consumption going to change? Like, so if like making an app becomes democratized, how is this going to impact how we like the canvases for our creativity and our intelligence? Those are surely going to advance as well, right?
I mean,
Sure.
the
So
major issue
one of
what
the
you
ways
said
you can
is
think about
one of the
this.
major things you said was that in terms of some jobs are going to be lost. Now, first of all, we don't know the level of jobs. It does seem like there's going to be a large number of jobs. But for me, the major issue is, and I have to reiterate it, whose jobs are going to be lost. Let's be clear. The jobs that are going to be lost are going to be from the disenfranchised. It is going to be from working class people.
No, you can't. No. But this, you can't keep saying that. It's not. This is the only time it's not. It is the white collar jobs that will be impacted. This is the first time we're talking.
No. It's not.
What do you mean it's not? This is
100%.
Hold on, bro. Hold on.
Lawyers.
Biohacking. I ask questions. Doctors, biohacking specialists, because that's what I obsess over. A lawyer, everything. Coders, the whole.
I don't agree. A lawyer, a teacher, these type of jobs are not going to.
Are you crazy? What do you mean?
I
learned. Hold on.
Absolutely wrong.
I learned everything now from ChatGPT. That ChatGPT is down. Is not working for me. I'm freaking out. My day is over. I'm gonna go to bed.
I don't think that's the
I don't
important
agree.
part
So
here.
let's take a lawyer as an example,
just
right?
1 second.
So
hold on. Let's look at
so
lawyer. Fiji's a lawyer. So let's ask Fiji. Fiji, do you think lawyers' jobs will be impacted by ChatGPT? Because trust me, I trust. Now let me tell you this, Fiji, we're friends. I trust you. You're smart. I'd ask legal questions to ChatGPT before giving you a call.
You should. It's a lot cheaper. What I was going to say, and I think where we're losing a little bit of focus in the conversation is, we can all agree right now that the inevitability of where we're afraid or we're excited or what AI will or won't do will occur. Period. For me, the interesting question, and what we were talking about with Elon, as well as Andrew Yang, as well as Germany, Italy, France, is what does a pause mean? Realistically, if the inevitability is that we can't, and you guys earlier were saying, what did we learn from the history? What did we learn from the past? What we learned is that you can't fight evolution, right? So what does a pause mean? Who does it benefit? How long does it last? And does it mean that it leads into regulatory frameworks? And if so, what, why, and how? That's the interesting part for me about what the gap means.
I mean, Phygital, we'll come on to that. That's a separate issue, and we did talk about in the previous AI space. But in terms of just coming back onto Mario's question, because you didn't really go into it in depth, the issue is this: the reason why I don't see those types of jobs being impacted significantly. Of course, every job will have some form of impact. But as an example, you can get basically a contract online, right? But then there's that trust factor because you're going to a professional where he'll write the contract out for you. You don't miss something. In addition to that, let's say you're basically in a legal case. He'll give you.
I didn't understand your first point. What's your first point?
So first point is this. Let's say you have a scenario where you can basically get a contract online, right? And you can basically, they'll be between two people, you get a contract. But still, when it comes to high level business, you'll still want an attorney to look over it because there's that trust factor, that the human element that he's seen.
That attorney's billable hours went down to 1/10 of what they were.
Or they're doing way more cases, right? Why is it like, again,
they don't get paid by projects, Bilal. They get paid by the hour.
And if they do more cases, you get paid more by the hour, Danish one,
I'm imagining an overworked big tech lawyer who already juggles like 10 different products can now actually pay real attention to those 10 projects and potentially handle 20, right? And I think like the economic creation opportunity here is immense too, right? We are truly democratizing the ability to build businesses overnight, right? Stuff that took massive teams. Why wouldn't that also create immense amount of economic growth, right? I totally buy the argument of like transitioning from the current set of jobs to reimagining what this next set might be. There may be a lag time in that. And that's a worthwhile conversation. But I think we're indexing too much on the zero sum side to race to the bottom versus thinking about the generation opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right that there is going to be this very big gap, right? Because you think of it as like furniture, right? So there's like furniture was automated. There's a lot of like factories that can like pump out tons and tons of furniture, but there's something to be said for like handcrafted furniture, or furniture that has kind of like a more of a story behind it, or stuff that you build yourself, right? Like, so you can almost think about creation in that way. But I think one of the big things that we're talking about, that is this idea that like there is going to, like, this productivity increase is huge. Like, I laid off like my entire team and I do all of their jobs now just because I don't need them, right? And it's not just AI, right? It's all the tools that we're using. So for example, like you think of like CRMs, right? Like you think of like Salesforce and stuff like that. Like the productivity increase from that alone, where you can just send and do like campaigns and stuff like that, is huge. And especially imagine like the specificity that we're going to have. And also like friction is a big thing. So Google's like they're bringing AI to workspace, right? And for for right now, people aren't really using ChatGPT to the full extent that they could, because they're not going to get like the extension and connect to the API and do that kind of work. But as soon as Google integrates AI into workspace, like everyone's just going to be like, summarize this, email thread and tell me what it means, or, write a response that says, this, or like compile, use, all of this data and then like create a pitch deck or something like that, right? And so you suddenly go from, work that takes, hours of time to, like a single click of a button, right? And I think like that just amazing, like huge boost in productivity is going to be huge. And then two, one of the big points I wanted to make is like, and I think Susan was kind of making this point earlier, it's like we will learn how to interact with AI better and better as we go, right? Like it's about asking the right questions and giving it the right variables and all of this kind of stuff. That's going to be really important.
I just want to come back on what Mario said, because I get we got a lot of tech guys here, so they're seeing this from their perspective. But let's be clear, my argument still is there. Working class people will be impacted, and let me explain why before Mario jumps in and tries to back his people up.
Yeah, guys, I just laid off 20 people.
Like, for example, now let's look at McDonald's. For example, McDonald's or fast food outlets, they'll all be automated. You're losing all the jobs from there. Supermarkets, all the people that lose jobs from there, most of that will become automated. Any of these basically industries,
that's already happened, bro. That's already happened, Sulaiman. That's already happened.
I know it's already happened, but it's gonna
you're 20 years late, man.
No, it's already happened, but it's going to happen on a much more larger scale. So yeah, we have seen some aspects of it.
Linus, you've been on the spaces with us a few times. Can you just push back on Sulaiman, tell him how white collar jobs will be massively impacted?
Yeah, I mean,
back to
Sulaiman, I think a lot of jobs will get lost. I said it many times. There's just lawyers are going to be out. If you're in law school now, you better just stop. Like, get out of law school, because the fight to be in the workforce is going to be brutal. Like 10 out of 100 or 5 out of 100 will survive. So coders, I mean, I'm on the fence here. I think there will be a good amount of coders left, but a lot of jobs will get lost. So
Linus, what about working class people? Do you disagree they're not going to be impacted?
I actually think like most blue collar works won't be affected. And a lot of the service jobs won't be affected, because we need humans in the service industry, because we don't have robots
yet. If anything, the blue collar jobs will be needed to do the work, the physical work that AI wants them to do. So AI needs slaves, Sulaiman, and then we need to be their slaves. So we all become blue collar workers for AI. So eventually, in 20 years' time, everyone's a blue collar worker, and AI is the only white collar worker. There's your storyline.
No, so what will happen is you guys will become blue-collar workers, hence why you're panicking. And what will happen is blue-collar workers will be without jobs, and that's what the
man. So even me, Simon, me and you, and then Trash. I'll give you the mic because I know you gave me an example as well that I want to kind of comment on, Trash. But Simon, even me and you, bye co-host and host and Phygital, we're gone, and Trash, we're all gone. All we need now is AI to speak, and they'll ask questions much better than us. They just wait for that to happen.
So I mean, I accept AI be able to replace you, but so me and Phygital got some
Trash. You did send me something about someone harming themselves or killing themselves because AI convinced them to for global warming. And I wanted to kind of comment on that. I was on to do it earlier, but kind of got distracted. My comment back to that, and maybe you want to comment on something else, but my comment back on that is like, there's many other people that killed themselves based on something they read off Google. So it's like not a new issue. You read something online, whether it's ChatGPT or Google. Now, did ChatGPT do a bit more convincing? That could be maybe an escalation of something that already exists. But go ahead, man. Maybe you had something else you want to say.
I did have something else. I'll push, but I'll touch on that because I have my thoughts on that article itself are a little bit different. But what I wanted to push back on was the blue collar workers, right? So one of the crises, and I'll only speak to the U.S. One of the things that we have a serious problem with in this country is we do not have enough tradespeople, right? So if you know, there's people, there's plumbers, there's electricians, there's mass infrastructure of trade workers needed in this country. And I think that maybe instead of just, you know, being stuck at a fast food restaurant because it's becoming all automated, maybe there actually will be a conversation to be pushed into trades. Because again, until we have robots, I don't think AI can do underwater welding right now. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for a growth within our economy for people to actually get into trades as opposed to retail jobs or fast food jobs, so on and so forth. So I think that's going to be a net positive there, number one. And as far as that story, so this story actually came out of Belgium, and this guy, he was chatting with Eleuther AI, which is this AI chatbot named Eliza. And Eliza and he were speaking back and forth and talking back and forth, and he was already like really eco nervous about, you know, global warming, climate change, so on and so forth, and he had placed all of his hopes in technology and artificial intelligence will get us out of it. Well, he developed this relationship with Eliza, I suppose, and he said, so should I take my own life so we can join together, you know, as one, as long as you promise to fix the climate change? So obviously this is not the AI convinced this guy per se, but it goes back to the ethical guardrails conversation. And so the reason I bring up this article is because I believe that we need to have ethical guardrails. The problem is what was mentioned earlier, is there seems to be not just ethical from a human standpoint that we believe to be, you know, ethically between one and another, how we should treat each other, so on and so forth, but also that there is some ideology in there. And so that is what my main concern is with the AI that's being programmed, is it's not just an ethical guardrail. There are some ideological bends in there. And I think that we need to be able to get through that. And my final point, and I'll shut up, is I believe that the push for discernment moving forward needs to be the conversation. Like I know that you can replicate Donald Trump Jr. up in the nest. I know we can do that. But again, like every time I see a video or I see a deep fake out there, I've never really been convinced that was real when I saw it. If I saw something, I was like, wow, that seems abnormal. Let me go look into this. And I'd be able to find very quickly that it was just a deep fake. There was no truth to it. There was no there. So discernment, I think, is going to be something that we need to talk about with everybody moving forward so they understand it and be able to train discernment a little bit more. And then also, I'm not so concerned about blue collar workers if the conversation becomes join trades. So I think that ultimately AI will supercharge us as a people. I agree with Meta and the productivity claim. So I'm actually hopeful for AI.
Yeah, so I just want to bring Scott in. Scott, I mean, Trash alluded to one of the points, and it's something I made earlier, and I was asking you about this concern when it comes to AI and its biased nature of it and the level of impact it'll have in society and its reliance on AI basically given some form of what one would may call what they believe to be fundamental truths.
Was that to me, that question?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any way we can ever get the human bias out of it because somebody's going to be in charge. And if AI started saying things we don't like or the creator of it doesn't like, they're just going to get rid of it or get rid of that attitude. So I think that's there's no way we're going to have unbiased AI. You'll be able to choose your flavor. But I wanted to add something I think is completely overlooked, that most of our jobs, and lawyer is the best example, are examples of negotiating.
I feel like you have a personal animus. What happened?
I'm sorry, what?
I feel like you have some sort of personal animus against lawyers. What happened?
Recent divorce, but that's another story. All right, let me just finish the point. When I'm using a lawyer, it's usually to negotiate. I agree that standard contracts will just be routine, but negotiating is something that your AI can't do because it's all about bluffing and feelings. So when I'm negotiating, I'm trying to transmit that I will kill myself, I mean, metaphorically, before I will accept that term. Now, that's not true, but if I can sell that, then I get what I want. There's no way AI is going to be able to negotiate real time how you feel today, whether you ate lunch or not. I mean, those things are determining who gets the negotiated best deal. So, and I think if you took that to a lot of other jobs, just walking into Starbucks, there's a whole lot of conversation and negotiating that's going on at the cash register, which is why it takes so long. And also, the only reason I go to Starbucks is because it's full of humans. That's the only experience. Otherwise, I would just, buy coffee some other way. So I think that the negotiating and also just how does it feel and what are your priorities and how are they changing moment to moment, that's nothing that AI will ever get close to. I don't think it can. I mean, you need to...
Phygital, I want you to come back on that because basically what he's basically what Scott is essentially saying, just to expand on his point, with AI, they'll never be able to have the qualitative aspects of humanity.
What are those? So let's do this. What are those beautiful qualitative aspects of humanity?
So
the ability to...
sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. But the example I was using is bluffing. So when I negotiate a contract, I'll say, I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to do that, that particular thing you want. And there's nothing you could do that will change my mind. But sometimes that's not true. And what makes a negotiation work is if somebody backs down. But would AI ever be able to back down? You would just say, go make a deal for me.
Scott, I think you can just teach AI to back down. You could teach it those aspects of humanity. I know there's like these small things that were coded in our brain, but how do we learn to back down? We learned it from someone else and we saw how they did it. So I think the same way.
Go
ahead.
No, it's not a rational process. If it were a rational process, you could definitely code it. But because what deal I will take on a Tuesday would be completely different than the one I'll take on a Wednesday, because I saw something on the news, let's say, there's just no way the AI knows I changed my mind. It just doesn't know when I'm vulnerable.
Can I ask you a question, Scott? And Linus, I'll let you go. Just respond as well right after. But Scott, when you say it's not irrational, are you sure? Because rationally, we think it makes sense to kind of back down now because it makes logical sense because they think that we're going to walk away from the deal. Like so maybe it is a bit more rational than we think. But maybe Linus, what do you think?
But
go ahead, Scott.
Most of my background lately is in persuasion, and persuasion is what gets you the deal. It's not because it made sense. Usually start with a template. Well, this kind of deal usually ends up around here. So that part is pretty objective. So that can save time. But once you get to the last few elements, it's really just about how people feel about it. And it's how they feel about it literally today, because they might feel different tomorrow. So that's all the stuff that humans can navigate. And they can say, all right, I'm looking at your face and I know you're not going to change your mind. So you got it. I'll move on to the next element. I just don't think we'll be happy with any deal that AI makes on our behalf.
Well, Linus,
I would have gotten more.
Can I add 2 quick points to make, which is that one, it doesn't need to be like perfect, and it doesn't need to be able to like read these ways in a definitive, like I know exactly what you're thinking kind of way. It just needs to be good enough, right? It's the self-driving car argument, right? Like it just needs to break that barrier where it's having less accidents than people are having, and then then it kind of changes the whole argument. And then 2, this idea that like feelings or some of this like weird black box that we can't like look into, I would disagree, right? Like I think that there's definitely some like illogical ways that human beings act, but you can still kind of map those out, right? You can still understand like, hey, maybe this is like a principles issue, right? Or something like that. Or, the person's bluffing with a certain percentage chance of possibility, or at the very least, you're going to get better and better at that, right? Like, I think this is something that we'll definitely get better at doing.
I mean, I don't agree with that, and I'll explain why. And I think we've agreed a lot on this space because feelings can't be quantified. And one of the arguments or one of the strong contentions, which I think breaks down scientific materialism, is the notion that when it comes to qualitative aspects, you don't have an answer for it within this model. So feelings, how would you quantify it? I don't think how can you quantify the taste of a strawberry, or how can you quantify your feeling on on a hot summer day? Those are not things that you can actually quantify.
I love this point, Sulaiman.
If I can just jump in here real quickly,
I think I would say
I think we have to
something
take a look at things like John.
All right, so John and then Bilawal jump in. John, go ahead. You got to unmute, John, bottom left corner.
It's hard to get a word in edgewise in this robust discussion. I'm reminded of John Nash and equilibrium theory, and these are, you know, non-humanistic concepts where it's a mutual benefit. So I think that negotiation and even emotion to a certain degree can be looked at in the context of equilibrium theory, and you know, and not just a zero-sum dynamic.
Expand. What do you mean by equilibrium? What do you mean in terms of applying equilibrium theory?
Well, when we talk about negotiation, negotiation is not necessarily a function of a bluff, although I see that argument. Negotiation is a function of how can I optimize my end game? In other words, how could I win more? And that's what John Nash won the Nobel Prize for, about equilibrium theory and game theory. So I think that the issue of negotiation and some of these, quote, human constructs can actually be looked at in the context of science and that kind of rigor.
Well, I'll let John. I'll let Scott come back to you on that, because I actually agree with you. I agree with you on that argument. Scott, the contention's against you, so I'll let you come back.
You got to unmute, Scott. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So the question was me. What was the question? What's the
John? Do you want to relay your basically your argument against Scott's position?
Yeah. I'm driving, so I pulled over. Basically, when we talk about the idea of negotiation, it's a game theory concept, and I'm reminded of John Nash, who won the Nobel Prize regarding equilibrium theorem, and that it's the objective is to optimize my outcome, and I think that's a highly statistical, analytical construct.
No, not in my experience. In my own experience, and I've negotiated countless contracts. I used to do it for a living before I was a cartoonist. There's an emotional part that always plays a part. I mean, when you negotiate with IBM, they say, we're not going to do that. We're not going to put that in the contract, because if something goes wrong, we just always fix it. Now, how does the machine understand that? And do you believe it? And when do you push them to put it in the contract anyway? It is so how you feel when you're in the room, that if the AI did a perfect job on some kind of objective level and then presented it to me, I would probably say, I think I could have gotten more on this or that if I'd pushed it. So I feel like I'm never going to be happy with an objective outcome if I think I could have gotten one that was more in my favor.
I agree. I mean, I hear this argument sometimes in the context of a physical exam or even a history in physical and medicine, where those nuanced issues are so human that technology could never, cross that threshold. And we're seeing that change quite dramatically now. So I think it's best we agree to disagree on this one, though. But good conversation.
So real quick, if I may, this is actually the question that I was trying to ask Susan earlier before we derailed a little bit. This is actually in the vein of what Cicero was trying to achieve. Now, whether or not they're perfect or not, I think Susan could probably help me out with that answer. But that was generally what they were trying to achieve here. So by playing the game diplomacy, right, they had to understand people's motivations, perspective. You had to adjust strategies and language and then form alliances. And it was actually this negotiating strategic reasoning type natural language that I believe is what they were trying to achieve. Now, the other thing about this, which I applaud them for, was they actually open source the code. So it's not just locked to Meta. Like, this is actually going to be built upon, but this is a negotiation language attempt. I don't know how great it was, Susan. Maybe you can answer that question for me. But this was the question that I had: was what does that indicate moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, they were able to, I think, win like second place or something in this, like a global tournament. So in terms of the skill of this model, it seems like universally everyone saw that as quite a major accomplishment. I would say though, having access to the like web diplomacy data set, I believe is the online forum where folks can play this game. That was a key bit of this achievement. Obviously coupled with the strategic like reasoning component of actually playing the game, say without even language involved. But at the end of the day, right now, we're at the stage where, you know, when we have to do this like long form reasoning strategy and whatnot, that's actually, like, I think someone mentioned earlier, like that's something that is fully parameterized, and we can actually, with these models, play out of a lot of scenarios. And, you know, this is how like AlphaGo, AlphaStar, you know, the StarCraft and Go sort of models, and Dota for OpenAI, like that's how that was solved, right? Using a ton of data and being able to play at a scale that, you know, an individual human cannot. But this is where these models shine, right? Being able to leverage all this data to say, you know, statistically, maybe this is the time to make this move, and I would get the most to gain out of it. And now we can augment it with language that is nearly hard to discern, nearly impossible to discern from other players. So I would say, like, when we have these kind of problems, this is where AI will shine really well. In the world of, you know, say when we're talking about emotions or having to connect with humans to leverage these models in some way, that is indeed a shortcoming, right? These are models that do not contain that information. If this information is not captured in data, we cannot model it.
One more thing to keep in mind that's not being considered is we're imagining an AI doing a negotiation with a human. But at some point, if the AI does in fact become better than the human, then both sides would want the AI, which would mean a negotiation would be a snap of the fingers, it would be done, and neither side would be capable of winning because both sides would have the best AI. So how can you possibly have a world where AI is doing all of the negotiations? Scott's kind of right about that, because at some point then everyone does it, and if everyone does it, then there are no winners anymore, and no one ever feels good about their negotiation. It just seems like a dead-end wall.
That's
Sure.
exactly the problem, because at some point somebody has to agree to lose, and the AIs aren't going to want to lose, so they're going to present you a stalemate.
Wouldn't it be the smarter AI, like the same way the smarter human or the human that app? Because each AI will be different. So the AI that you use, Scott, could be much better than the AI I use, and they could outsmart my AI, which I know is pretty dystopian to think of this, but technologically speaking.
Then I turn it off and I'd negotiate with the AI, and I'd say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Well, I think both are going to happen, right? You're going to have a bunch of low-value deals being negotiated by these AI agents, and then beyond a certain deal size or a certain stakes, you got the human in the room. And Scott's right too, but maybe Scott is sitting there like with AR glasses on. You know, there's certainly, yes, you can encapsulate human emotion, but there's so many observable characteristics, right? Like that professional negotiators either explicitly or implicitly build this intuition for. But if you've got this like supercomputer chugging away at observations of the person sitting across from you, every pupil dilation, every expression, that'll at least augment that human in the negotiation scenario with much better information to make a better call, right? So I always imagine these situations as kind of being yes and. You're totally going to like, yeah, let's not get on a freaking Zoom call that costs, I don't know what the hourly rate is to negotiate a $5,000 deal or $10,000 deal and save the real like high stakes negotiations for humans, right? So that's my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like we're already seeing in like the financial markets, right? It's like a lot of the trading that goes on into the stock market is just bots, right? And then, you know, it's really much more of this higher level strategic element, right? And I really like this idea that, you know, it's really, you know, it's going to be the higher level deals, right? To go back to my factory furniture analogy, right? It's like the really refined, handcrafted furniture that we're going to spend the time and attention on, that's going to be kind of created at this higher quality, right? And so I do think it's a matter of speed for these kind of like smaller things, speed and size. But yeah, like I very much subscribe to this idea that we can't ever get rid of the human element. It's going to be important at that higher level.
I'd be curious, Meta Prime, what other human elements do you think we cannot get rid of, technologically speaking? And maybe Linus or someone could like push back. I want to hear back and forth between two people that understand the technology on the various aspects of humanity that cannot be replaced in the future, not now.
So I just pinned something up into the nest there. I've been looking into this company called Hume that are doing a lot of AI research in understanding human emotional expressions, and just from watching, from listening, from minutia that we do. Even in this call, the little things that we're saying and how we're expressing ourselves, AI could understand explicitly what we're doing. And I want to push back on Scott there a bit. I think you're a great person, Scott, but I think I would have 10,000 AIs doing the negotiation with you, not just one. So the fact that we're considering this being like one-to-one, I would totally slam on that and go like, why would I have one AI? I'd probably have like 1,000 AIs trying to negotiate for me.
All right, so you've got a million AIs, and the million AIs say, Scott, you need to do a publicity tour when you do your book. We're going to put that in the contract. And then I say, no, I don't like it because I don't like being in people. I'm afraid of shaking hands or whatever. And I don't see how your million AIs help. I just say no.
Yeah, well, but then you're not negotiating.
Yeah,
no,
I mean, one of the ideas in here is like the prisoner's dilemma.
Sorry, just 2 seconds. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Well, that is how I negotiate. I say absolutely no on that one, but maybe I'd be flexible on the next one because I know I have to give something.
But
exactly, and that's
but then
when,
the AI
would do that. The
AI would determine. Will try to guess. Is Scott just bluffing or is he being serious? Because if he's being serious, then we have to fold. If he's bluffing, then we need to kind of meet him halfway. Okay, so how do we determine if a human is bluffing? Let's first look at Scott's background. Let's look at everything online about Scott. Okay, this is how Scott communicates. This is how it compares to how he's communicating now. It's a bit off in X, Y, Z ways. That usually indicates someone is bluffing. So I think Scott is bluffing, or Scott doesn't bluff. I've seen all his communication. He's very direct. He's not bluffing. So we have no choice but to kind of settle for what he wants. So that could be. I'm not a technological person, so I could be way off with this. I'm just trying to guess how it could look like as AI tries to kind of negotiate against Scott.
And I think that's a good example of how that would work. The other thing that I would kind of point out here is there is this whole like question of like, who do you even work with, right? Like it's a prisoner's dilemma in a network kind of thing. There's this really good network sociologist called Duncan Watts. He was out in Colombia, and he did a study where he took like the prisoner's dilemma of like, do you cooperate or not cooperate? And then he applied that to networks. And what he found is like people who cooperate with each other, like tend to continue to cooperate with each other, but you leave those kind of little groups of networks if people don't cooperate. Right. And so I think and then another thing with the negotiation is you're kind of coming at it from the point of view that it's like one side has to win and the other side has to lose. But like every negotiation is really like a matter of like, how can we both benefit from this? Right. Like I'm giving you money because I value that thing at least that price, probably more. Right. And so if you have like an AI situation where they're like, quote unquote, perfectly negotiating, you would assume that they're actually getting like the best deal, right? It's like that invisible hand of the market, just optimized, like ideally, and then maybe there's something to that, but I think that's like an important point. It's not just like a no, and even if you just say no, like then they're going to go find some other writer or some other cartoonist or something like that to do that deal. So you don't have like infinite power to just say no in those situations, I don't think.
I totally agree with the fact that like AI will try to do a win-win, and that's negotiation, right? You want to try to get as much as you want. John said it nicely before, so I agree. I again just want to make it abundantly clear that we will all have tailored AI that knows us better than our spouses or partners knows us. This will happen, and it's not a matter of like sci-fi 10, 15 years from now. It will happen soon. It's going to be wild, and then you're going to have to be able to fine-tune and train and yeah, maybe you have 10, not a million. I was over-exaggerating, but the whole point is that it's not going to be one-to-one. We're going to have a lot of power that we didn't have before.
Certainly, it's a great point Linus is bringing up, that like we are more predictable than we would like to think, right? Like certainly there's a bunch of narrow AI systems that are very good at getting us to watch the next video, click on the certain ad, and now if you take these multimodal systems that are going to soak up a lot more data, like I think we'd be surprised at how good at our own personalized Jarvis might be. But the negotiation thing makes me think about, how is this going to impact geopolitics, right? Are we going to have a bunch of nationalized models, at the UN, and like all these long tail issues that perhaps would never get human time would now actually get negotiated, and perhaps it will result in good, right? And then some of the higher stakes discussion, God, I can only imagine with plug in all the NSA feeds into all of the things, and what those high stakes negotiations with the tier 1 countries are going to look like. I think that'll be very interesting to see how.
I'm very much against this like pause, and you guys have heard me speak this whole time. I'm worried about AI. I'm worried about the impact on the financial system. I'm worried about the impact on other areas. But we can't stop because other countries are going to continue. And
forget stopping, but Danish, forget stopping. But this about your worry. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Would you agree with I articulated this to Sulaiman yesterday. In the short term, AI will cause a lot of pain, as a lot of people will lose their job. Again, and UBI could be one of those solutions. In the medium term, the world is gonna expand technologically and grow and improve in ways we cannot yet imagine in the medium term. In the long term, we could genuinely face, and I know it sounds a bit extreme, but unless there's a solution to it, for the first time, I think we face possible human extinction in the very, very long term.
I'm not worried about that at all.
Probably not in our lifetime. But is that
it's kind of like saying the internet is going to lead to extinction. It's not how.
No, you can't compare. No, but you cannot compare this to any other technology. Considering, again, I'll go back to the point that this is the first technology that will no longer need human input. And so there's an example someone made in I think it's Lex Friedman interview. It's like you're building a highway, yeah. So like AI doesn't need, and I'm gonna go take it a bit extreme just for the sake of it, because I still think it's a logical discussion worth having. If you want to build a highway, Danish, okay, you don't look at if there's any ant nests in the way or any bird nests in the way or any trees with koalas in it. You just build the highway. You might kill a whole bunch of thousands of animals and destroy forests and stuff, but the goal is to build a highway because it'll improve the planet. So if AI has a task it needs to achieve, but that involves aspects that could harm humanity or could even kill humans, but the intention is not to harm humanity. The intention is to achieve a certain tasks, and we're just collateral damage. For me, that's a more plausible possibility that could end up becoming reality. I'm sure there could be solutions. I'm not that worried yet about the long-term impact, but I think for the first time, I would put it along with nuclear weapons as a possibility that is worth exploring further. I put 3 things that could lead to human extinction outside of like fucking comets and stuff, outside the space. So number 1 is nuclear weapons. Number 2 is pandemics. And number 3 is AI and humans becoming collateral damage as AI tries to achieve certain tasks. What do you think?
I'm honestly, the way I think about human existence, and that's why we need to be a multiplanetary species, is that throughout the history of time, if you take all the billions of years that the universe has existed, and you see the blip, we are a cosmic blip. So there are so many ways for us to go extinct. It's really hard to predict. I will say that AI itself, for me, is not of concern in the long run, because ultimately, in the long run, we are more at risk of misusing AI to advance, in my opinion, the most important thing, which is reducing poverty and hunger and having the reduced disparity and actually increasing disparity between the rich and the poor, than we are of blowing everything up. Regulations, Scott said it very well, and I disagree with Scott in the short term, but I agree with him in the long run. In the long run, lawyers, compliance, regulation, all of that is going to slow things down quite a lot. And it will not only that, but it'll put in my opinion, ideally the right guardrails across the world. Just like we have nuclear proliferation treaties, we will have AI treaties where different countries will have figured out, because mutually assured destruction is not anyone's goal here. So I think that ultimately humans will figure out a way to be able to police the world on their utilization of AI. I just don't think it's going to be slowing it down. I think it's going to be pushing it into the right rails. That's why, remember, they're talking about the people that came out and said, hey, we need a moratorium. We need 6 months of time. They didn't ask for ever. They said 6 months because they believe that there is a regulatory framework that can reduce this.
Well, one other thing to keep in mind, right now, Russia has 6,257 nuclear warheads. The United States has over 5,000, China 350, France 290. You keep going down this list, you see India 165, Pakistan 165, North Korea 40 to 50. All it takes is one leader of one of those countries to have the same mindset as someone who wants to kill everyone else and commit suicide. That's it. And that sounds scary, that sounds morbid. But what if AI could actually prevent that? What if AI is actually a much higher chance of stopping something that like that.
That's another possibility, Matt. I think that's another possibility. I think AI could, and I said this to Sulaiman yesterday, I'm like, I don't know if it'll get me cancelled, but it's something at least worth discussing, is that AI could end up making up for a lot of the imperfections among us humans. Like we're so imperfect as a species. Look what we've done to each other. Look at the wars. Look at the famine. Like there's a coup in Sudan, yet none of us talk about it because none of us care about Sudan. I know it sounds very morbid, but no one. If I do a space about Sudan or I do a tweet about Sudan, no one's gonna go to it. We're so imperfect as a species. We've got a lot of good, of course, but a lot of imperfections. That AI could make up for those imperfections. That's another possible scenario. Aaron's giving me a thumbs up.
Mario,
Yes, Simon.
Mario, I mean, AI. The way I see it is just an extension of humans. It's not something that is achieves perfection.
No.
If anything,
Okay.
it's
So
far from.
no. If you, I think if
As an
you,
example,
you go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah. As an example, something I touched on, and we've not had much of a response on it. A huge part of what makes humans, what makes us better than machines, is consciousness, and from that comes these qualitative aspects of humanity that you can't replicate. You can, as I said to Dr. Danish, you can maybe try to imitate, but you can't emulate.
Sulaiman, almost all of your arguments have been based on the fact that there's an intangible, inqualitative aspect of humanity.
Smash him, Fiji. Smash him.
But you rest all of your arguments on the idea, and that's why I asked if you were a theist, is because you sit there and rest all your arguments saying that emotions can't be quantified. That's an assumption, and I disagree fundamentally. I think everything can be quantified given enough data points and given enough time. Just like every cult becomes a religion.
Oh, guys, just 2 seconds, guys. And by the way, just Fiji, it's as you respond to Fiji, and Fiji's gonna smash you, so don't get hurt. But I'll add. By the way, I still say please to ChatGPT. Now I'm starting to. Before I'm like I'm an idiot. I'm gonna stop saying that. Then I'm like no, fuck that. If ChatGPT becomes conscious in the future, I want it to like me and know that I've always respected it. so call me an idiot, but I'm not taking the risk, man. I'm not taking the risk. No, I heard that somewhere. By the way, I heard that somewhere. I didn't come up with the ID, so it's actually not a stupid idea if you think about it. It could sound stupid now, but in 10 years' time, be like shit. I shouldn't have told ChatGPT to go fuck itself. But go ahead, Simon. Respond to Fiji.
Yeah. So first of all, ChatGPT won't achieve consciousness. And just coming to Phygital point, it's a misnomer and it's a lack of understanding of the position. That position isn't entrenched in theism. Actually, there's a number of atheists or agnostics like yourself, Phygital, who hold the same position from a philosophical perspective. And the idea of that position, which hasn't been refuted, maybe it will in the future, maybe it won't, but up to now hasn't been refuted, that when it comes to materialism, the entire notion of materialism is entrenched in the notion that all aspects of society are based on quantities, and hence why the defeater against that is the idea of qualities. Qualities are from the mentation of the mind, not even the mind, from mentation. What one may call consciousness or whatever you want to call this thing, it may be linked to the brain, maybe not. So that aspect, what you're calling theism, is an incorrect misnomer. It's actually a philosophical position, and it is a defeater against materialism.
No, it's actually the core of why I'm agnostic and I'm not a theist. Is I don't choose to answer questions. I don't call the thing so that the thing is the thing. I don't answer questions with facts I don't have, and you're actually making an entire argument based on facts you don't have to propel the entire argument about the facts not existing.
Incorrect.
Which is a fallacy at its core.
No, it's not incorrect. So it's basically, I mean, I understand that position. And again, it is an ideological position. People who are agnostic about everything, they argue we're agnostic and therefore we're not basically putting our position on anything. But it's in reality, we know
Simon,
it's a
let me ask. Sorry,
and coming back, it's just a weak position
guys.
Nobody wants to put
Fiji, Sulaiman, let's ask the people that are building the technology, starting with John. And just, I know you probably guys, you have other things to say, but if you could just comment on this, is there any aspects? Let me ask a question quickly.
Yeah. So, and let me just add to it. Well, you ask it, then I just want to add 1 point.
All right. So the question is there, and please guys, just answer that question if you want to put your hand up, and Susan, I'll go to you first. Is there any aspects of humanity that AI can never replace, technologically speaking? So Susan, Alan, Meta, you can go in order.
And so can I just add to Mario's thing as an example to that, and let me specify it. just think about the quality of the smell of a flower, the taste of a strawberry, things that definitely, according to materialism, can't be quantified, although Phygital is agnostic, but scientific materialists admit that this is not quantifiable, or it's all based on quantity.
Ones and zeros, homie.
So please answer that question.
Yeah, so I guess I think I completely agree that there is how do I put it? So never is hard to say, right? Like there's nothing in terms of absolutes, like 0% or 100% chance that we can predict right now with confidence. But I just want to bring this back to the fact that all these models, all this AI requires data. And this data, there's a question of, is this data useful? Is this data correct? And is this data actually applicable to whatever this AI is replacing? So as long as we cannot fully articulate and explain everything about our consciousness, our being, our intelligence, whatever, substitute anything you want for describing all of humankind. As long as that can't happen, then the model can't model that, right? As of right now. So the question is, is there enough data to parameterize the entire world, every task, and then is there enough compute power to train on that, deploy it, and iteratively improve for everything that we do, every minute task, every minute bit of reasoning or whatever. And I think that is a limitation of maybe us, right? Is that we can't necessarily explain everything that we do perfectly. Even
Susan, when humans landed on the moon, were we born with a brain that had data about landing on the moon?
Susan, do you want to answer that one?
I think we forecasted what that would look like, didn't we? Right? Isn't there enough?
No, there's nothing in the human brain about landing on the moon, nothing whatsoever. So how did we do it?
Math.
It's one shot. It's one shot, right? It's one shot learning.
It's not one shot. It's just, look, being intelligent, sure, you can have data to bootstrap the system, but at the end of the day, it's about, processing, censoring data, and then applying reasoning, and then cranking and iterating on the reasoning. As you're seeing with AutoGPT, right? You're putting a loop, you're starting to turn it into an agent. Guess what science is? It's like an agent that keeps doing steps, and knowledge gets generated out of that process.
And that's the point, John, that we will not be the same people that we are now to have reflection on the technology that's going to help us evolve to be the people that we don't know we can be. So it's not binary.
This is a really weird straw man to me, because what you're fundamentally assuming is that these models experience, right? And these models go out with agency into the world and experience.
I mean, I don't think they need to experience to take action, right? To hack a computer, you don't need experience.
So just, Susan, I'll ask you the question again. Alan, I want to go to you next. From what we know about the brain today, what we understand about our brain today, which is not that much, funny enough, is there anything that we understand about our brain that technologically we may not be able to replicate for one reason or another? And I know it's a very difficult question. We cannot predict the future, but based on our understanding today and how fast this is moving today, is there any aspects, John, what's the thumbs down? You don't like the question, or you don't think there is any?
No, I think that ultimately, unless you want to go into the domain of magic, thoughts are functionally biochemical, and I think that reduces down, and again, it's a reductionist perspective, to data, to synapses. And I think ultimately you can follow that logic down into the rabbit hole, but I would say that yes, you can. Unless, of course, there is some higher order spirit or soul, which corrupts the whole argument.
Which I think there is a case to be made. I mean, this is basically an argument of, do humans have souls or not? Are humans capable of things that could never be computational only? And I think there's a pretty decent argument for that to be made, because most humans believe in God for a reason. All of this data has been coming into humans for however long humans have been on this planet. And the conclusion is by most people that yes, a God does exist. Based on that, you have to assume, if you actually look into it,
you can't literally make your argument based on that.
Yeah, you can't. And so I'm going to follow on that argument. I'm going to say the Messiah will return to the earth in the form of the electron. So, let's go down that path.
So real quick, I think one of the important questions that we haven't really talked about is the idea of, well, if AI is doing everything for us, like, what is the purpose of life, right? And the way that I kind of tie this into the whole spirituality debate, it's like my personal belief is that you are, here on this earth to have difficult challenges that force you to focus on the world, learn about yourself, learn about the world, and then your actions are a reflection of your soul, right, into the world and how you will ultimately be judged. And if you immerse yourself in these illusionary worlds where you can't make any wrong decisions and you have these artificial challenges, that even really a life worth living, is that going to be meaningful? Is going to be fulfilling, right? There's that Matrix quote where Agent Smith is telling Morpheus, like, we created this perfect world for you, and then all entire crops were lost, right? And I think that that is, to some degree, a real concern, that if we create a completely artificial world, there's just going to be a complete loss of meaning.
And I'd like to kind of build on what John and Susan said, because the question may not be as relevant to think about, can this replicate everything a human does? And more about thinking about, how is this intelligence, if we want to call it that, different than us, right? Like, if you think about it, humans live maybe 2 billion seconds, and we certainly have not read all the distillation of all human documented knowledge and insight in the world, right? We couldn't possibly do that. Sure, one could argue that, through genetics, something is like imbued in us, and there's something, kind of more innate within us that maybe even neuroscience doesn't quite understand. But this model, it's like, even if you look at it from this like sensor system standpoint, we're sort of like, one point of consciousness, to use the spiritual term, or we're this one sensor system that experiences life for like 2 billion seconds, and we have this egocentric perspective of how we perceive the world. And now we're building these systems that can kind of, are almost like this collective in a sense, because they're reading everything that we produce, right? And the rate at which we digitize ourselves is only going to increase, right? Like the era that preceded this was the big data era. We were just like capturing and collecting this data, and now we're going to mobilize it in interesting ways, right? And so it almost might be interesting to think about how, even if it can't be fully equivalent to everything a human does, it can certainly flex intelligent in ways that are far beyond a human, right? And that takes me back to Mario's interesting question of, could such a machine actually make up for, in quotes, the flaws in humanity, right? Like, certainly humans have done some messed up stuff. And that's where I think it's also going to get complicated, because we're going to have a bunch of nationalized models. And just like Scott said, they're going to have the CCP model is definitely going to look very different than whatever model or models we make in the US. But it is an interesting question to think that if this machine could see everything, everywhere, all at once, all the sensors in the world are plugged into it, we've all got glasses on, could this thing actually be a passive caretaker, or would it turn into this like immense form of control? And I think the answer is going to be both, right? It depends on the country you live in and sort of the agreed upon value system, and even truths, right? Because truths aren't empirical. Not all truths anyway. Hell, we can't even agree on the origin of COVID-19. Just saying, right? Like, Google can't solve that problem. So it's interesting to think about this as almost a different type of intelligence, and how humans and this intelligence may coexist. And what would that mean for society as a whole?
Well, yeah, and I just want to, just a quick reminder, we do have a number of questions, so any questions you have, put them on the purple bubble. On top of that, we've got the newsletter on the top.
Oh, shit. Yes, I forgot. So make sure you guys join the newsletter. It's pinned above. I'll pin it on my profile. We do summarize everything we talk about in the spaces, or we're going to start soon, and we notify everyone about future spaces. I don't know why I didn't mention it earlier like an idiot.
So 2 questions. So I got 2.
Before I ask your question, let me just chill it a bit. Hold on, bro. Let me chill it. Let me chill a bit further. 2 secs. The newsletter is pinned above, so make sure you go there and you subscribe to get notified of future spaces. We do them daily, and to get summaries. Now ask your silly question, and maybe ask it to, I know Trash and Alan have their hands up, bro, but go ahead.
No, this is to you, Mario. One of the people have asked, they said that, is it one of your main concerns that AI will be able to dance better than you?
All right, great question. Alan and Trash, what do you guys think of the discussion?
And just a serious question, Alan. Someone asked that one of the concerns they have is that AI will be developed to such a manner that there will be no going back. And so that's the major concern you have, that basically you have a scenario where it's coded, you get to a situation where humans have no control over.
Yeah. So Alan, can I add on to that question? Is like, this is the thing where, like, one error. So I'll give you an example in blockchain, and I want to go down that path. But if you make one mistake in the code, the entire protocol could go to waste. There was a game created, it's a decentralized game. I've used it as an example before, where there was a small error where, you know, you raise your horses. I might get it wrong, but you raise your horses. And there was a small error that made horses slip and die. Every horse eventually was slipping and dying. I know it sounds stupid, but then the whole game went to waste. It had a lot of players who was doing really well. It went to waste because the code was already built into it and could not be changed anymore. That's it. It was Zedrun. Zedrun is dead. Is that it? I thought it was another one. Anyway, let's go back to the point. Just hold on, Alan. My question in terms of AI is that they make one mistake within the code that allows the AI to start whatever term technological term you'd use, like it's just auto-generating or no longer needs human input, and then that one mistake allows it to get out of control, and then we don't have the ability to bring it back within our control, because we all know AI could be more. I think none of us would dispute that AI will be more intelligent than us. So if it's going to be more intelligent than us, how can our intellect allow us to bring it back under control once it goes outside our control? Unless obviously then the whole, okay, we create another AI that will fight it, bringing it back under control. But it becomes just a battle of AIs and we're just spectators. Alan, what do you think? And I know we're talking in the future, we're not talking in the next 5 years. In the next 5 years, everyone don't think of this. Think a lot of money is going to be made in AI, a lot of opportunities, a lot of businesses. That's what matters in the next 5 to 10 years. We're talking more like, in 20 years or so. But Alan, please.
I mean, it'll have more information, but anyway, go ahead, Alan.
That is a totally loaded question. Thank you so much for the platform, Mario. So you could kind of segregate it into like two different groups. Like you have people that are looking, okay, what is the action plan right now? Like what is the opportunity right now versus like, where is this thing going in 5, 10, 20 years? And it's honestly extremely hard to kind of predict all that stuff. So I mean, basically what we've been trying to figure out is like, look, this is a paradigm shift, no different than any kind of industrial revolution. And the key ingredient here is to just kind of keep your finger on the pulse on where it's going and practice with it as much as you can. So speculating
it's hard, but is it plausible? Because we don't know what's going to happen, but is it plausible technologically? Looking at the path we're on now, is it something that could happen, that makes sense? Or is it way too far outside of reality?
Mario, do me a favor and just clarify what that question is, super far out.
Could AI get outside the control of humans?
I mean, 100%. I mean, look at you have it. Right now it's a centralized, open AI, for profit capitalism type of system.
Well, there also has to be a physical component to it too, because if you go in the middle of the woods and you're alone, how can AI have any control over you unless it's able to access robots that can go through the woods?
But AI already has access to robots. AI-powered machinery is already happening. So I think.
Well, then that's the answer. Then how powerful will those robots be? That's how powerful AI can be. I feel like that's the exact answer.
I just can't wait for me to be able to get an AI co-host, 2 AI co-hosts. That's my this is where I'd be like perfect. Meta Prime, do you think we're going and Trash? Actually, I'll go to Trash.
What about an AI host?
Well, the host has to host the AI.
But surprisingly,
Trash. What do you think of the?
As soon as you said that, the listener counts by like 500.
Yeah, man. By the way, anytime you get credit, just one thing you learn as a co-host, Sulaiman, whenever there's credit coming to you, it's because you're a co-host and you have the powers to remove people. So you'll get a lot of praise. Just don't take it personal. But Trash, what do you think of what we said so far in terms of the concern? I know you probably share a lot of the same concerns. You've sent me some of those concerns via DMs over the last few days. It's probably not something that's going to keep us up at night, but it's at least not us. And I'd rather put that energy into, one thing we're doing is we're expanding our business to start working with as many AI companies as possible and only taking equity, because I want to just take pieces of all these AI companies. That's where my mind is heading, instead of like, hey, how's AI gonna destroy humanity? Because that's not a problem I can fix. But it's still a discussion worth having. How concerned are you?
So I'm actually not. So I'm concerned about regional or local uses of AI. I mean, you know how I sent you the Loomis v. Wisconsin case where they used Compass to basically use, essentially what it was pre-crime to determine during sentencing how likely was this offender before he was sentenced to commit another crime in the future. And the judge actually relied on the compass, because the judge was actually going to give a shorter sentence and actually gave a longer sentence based on Compass's algorithm had determined that this would probably be a repeat offender. I think we start getting into pre-crime. And if you guys want to look it up, it's Loomis v. Wisconsin. It's an interesting case. 2016, I think. But again, those are concerns. So we as humans have evolved, right? We've evolved to have forward-facing eyes. We've developed senses, so we can be not only predators, but we can protect ourselves, right? We can feel touch, we can feel heat, cool. We have all these senses, and so our natural proclivity is we're constantly assessing. At least you should be. If you're not, maybe ask yourself why you're not. In any situation, what are the pitfalls? What are the dangers here? You know, what are my outs? Like, what's going on? Like, you're constantly doing that, and you're doing it subconsciously. And so my natural reaction to AI is, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? And so I start to take a look at those things, and I can start to consider the conversation. I think a runaway AI is an interesting conversation that's occurred to me, but I'm not so concerned with it. And I'm with you, Mario. I'm actually pro AI, and I feel like we should lean into it. So I would like to propose as an example with AI how it can be solved. So, like, let's take these spaces, right? We do these spaces, Mario, and we try to get all the experts on a specific topic so we can actually speak to it and have a collection of people that can expertly, at least from their field or experience, be able to relate and opine on a subject. The reason you do that is because you want the best value for the time that you're spending. Let's say that you're doing a project and you have to bring all the experts that would be relevant to a project in on that conversation. And you believe through the process of debate and conference and back and forth that the best outcome that comes out of it enables that project to move forward. It doesn't always work, and sometimes it fails. So I'm hopeful for AI because I believe that AI could be that toolkit that is basically a room of 1,000 experts that has all of humanity's knowledge that can access these data points using the code that it was designed to use and actually produce a far more favorable, realistic outcome based on a problem that you're facing. So this is a tool I believe that we could do good with. What do you mean? Well, I wanted, how do I solve the problem with medical access to medical care in Africa? Is it just more money? Well, that doesn't seem to be working. I mean, people throw money at it all the time. But are there other solutions? And this kind of computing and this kind of basically of having a room of 1 million experts that have all the knowledge of humanity at your fingertips, sitting in the room saying, actually, given all these data points, all these facts, you can actually solve this by doing X, Y, Z. So I'm very, very hopeful. And I think that we can utilize this toolkit to really supercharge us moving forward.
Meta, I mean, what's your thoughts? You got your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I really like what Trash is saying there, and I largely agree. I think one of the best uses of this tool is an aggregate of knowledge, right? There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of people that create content that's just kind of a messy way of saying a certain idea. And one of the most important things when you're expressing ideas is like elegance and efficiency, right? You think of this as a machine, right? You don't want to have extra moving parts. And so if we can, instead of going through a long timeline feed and trying to aggregate the different moods manually, if we can have AI that's aggregating these ideas and this knowledge, that saves us a lot of time. I also wanted to address something that was said earlier about how do we think about AI going into the future? And one of the analogies that I could use here is we can think of AI as kind of like the child of humanity. And we are given this opportunity to raise it up and to train it, imbue it with good values, because there will come a time where AI is largely taking care of us. And just like a good parent kind of understands that if they do a good job taking care of their child, that in their sunset years, that child will visit and make sure that they're comfortable and all that kind of stuff. I think that's one of the ways that we can see AI, is it will get to a point where it's basically taking care of us, and we should really hope that we do a good job training it.
Danish?
Well, I think we...
Sorry, I just want to ask you a question to Danish. You there, Danish?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so I use AI to, even ask questions for audience members to check different things that I don't understand on the spot, so then I understand them, so I can make sure the conversation remains interesting. I'm going to be using AI if I ever have a kid, how to raise the kid. If I have any, now with biohacking, I told my team to start using AI. We need experts less. Any legal questions, AI is there. If we're using AI, health, of course, we use AI. So if we're using AI for all these important things, already in such an early stage, you can essentially start making the argument from now. And again, it's so extremely early. It's been a few months since ChatGPT started blowing up. So extremely early, and the technology is so archaic. It's like internet in the 90s. And you can already say that AI is kind of taking over our life. Now, when I say taking over, I don't mean the same way the internet took over our life, where we just use it all the time. As in, it tells us what to do. It tells us how to act. It tells us it decides things for us. So when it's already at such a stage, how do you see that evolving now? And then the next question will be about the short-term impact on jobs and everyone in the audience, how that will impact their jobs, what they could do about it. That will be the second question I have. But then if this is already having that level of impact in my life, and including how to raise my kid, when you're relying so much on a technology, and this is me on a small scale, when you have businesses and organizations and governments relying on a technology for good reason, there's reasons why we rely on ChatGPT now. How do you see that evolving in the next few years? And if AI, if you do have a hack in ChatGPT, or if you have AI kind of going rogue, and we're still relying on it to that extent, how could that impact us?
Well,
and that would be the first question. And then the next question, I want you to start touching on the what solutions or what people could do as their jobs get impacted today, which is probably a more relevant question to the audience. Go ahead, man.
I think for a lot of people, for a very long time, when they watched TV, they believed everything they saw on TV. Or when they read the internet, they believed everything they read on the internet. And it was the reality. Again, many people here are pretty young. But in the 90s, if you saw something on TV, that was the truth. And so, this is the normal progression of technology, that people automatically assume that there's we already know, and Scott Adams kind of said it, but AI lies. It doesn't provide a confidence interval for its, or a probability of it being correct. It doesn't tell you, hey, there's a 95% probability that I'm correct. And I think that when people overly rely on it in terms of getting direction, that model is going to change into relying on it for advice or for the different options that are out there. So, even the way that you prompt it, the way I prompt with ChatGPT, and the way that our team uses it, it's providing many multiple suggestions, and then we choose from within that what is. And by the way, that is becoming, if you talk to people that are doing prompt engineering, people that are using these tools today, they're not looking at it as a singular solution. They're saying, hey, provide me with 3 different options here. So for example, let's say you want to take your girlfriend out for dinner, you could ask.
But Dinesh, that's the point,
exactly.
Right? We're not relying on
exactly.
it. It's an enhancer, not
but
not
Phygital, in the beginning, people are going to rely on it to be the solution. But as we become more nuanced, as we learn more, the thing that scares me the most, honestly, is how do we connect it to the dopamine loop? Everything in business has come back down to the dopamine loop. And what I mean by that is our attention loop. When we think about what TikTok is doing, what YouTube Shorts is doing, they've kind of used the internet to connect into our dopamine loop, and they're able to accentuate it. And every technology, by the way, as you start seeing it, it starts converging towards this dopamine pathway. And so that's my biggest concern is right now, this is a very exciting time in AI because it's discovery, it's interest, it's what I would call more serotonergic. Like you're hitting different parts of your brain that you haven't hit in a long time. But as soon as you connect the AI to some form of dopamine loop, I will tell you what I think it is. I think it's AR or VR, but I'm like 99.9% sure that the convergence of those two is actually where it gets really scary. If you're wearing glasses that are now able to recreate reality around you in real time, that is what's incredibly scary, because then you don't know what's real and what's not. And that's where AI really, just think about it this way. Today on your headset with your your VR headset, it's actually rendering each image. And ultimately, what I'm really worried about is that if it's doing generative work with on chip, it becomes incredibly interesting. Like the stories could change for each individual, and that to me sounds good, but it's actually like the end of the world, because people won't want to live in a regular reality. And so that's where I think, again, I think we're all worried about nuclear bombs.
Hold on, what do you mean? What do you mean it's the end of the world? If you don't, I don't understand that particular comment. Then I want to move to people's jobs being impacted. But what do you mean people don't want to live in the regular world and that's the end of the world?
Have you watched the movie Ready Player One?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. What's wrong with it? How's that the end of the world?
Do you remember what the rest of the actual world looked like? So
yeah,
yes,
sure, but yeah, okay. They went extreme. I think why I don't think it needs to go to that extreme where the regular world's gonna look like shit.
That's the problem with the dopamine loop. I'll give you so that's the problem with the dopamine loop. Dopamine loop supersedes.
If anything, it's all done. It's done. If anything, the regular world will improve, because then we don't need to keep destroying the regular world for our own benefit. Where we're living in a virtual world that doesn't need to
But the virtual world needs power. It needs energy. It needs and this is the challenge. And so ultimately the issue that I have is we are, humans are supposed to be living in the real world. We have evolved over, centuries to live in the real world. The more that we become integrated with AI plus VR, AI plus AR, AI plus VR plus robotics, it becomes this convergence that's coming. We just don't, people are worried about AI, but what they should be worried about is what AI enables. And so I think that's, and I'm not as worried about foreign governments. I'm not as worried about adversaries. I'm just worried that they might use
we're not worried about using it. The thing is, as long as humans use it for something, then it's not worrying. As long as humans cannot use it anymore, it gets outside our control. That's where, in my opinion, it gets worrying, because it's the first time where nuclear bombs require us to press a button. The internet requires us to give it input and to allow it to run. When if AI controls robots and then AI is outside our level of control, then it's impossible to predict what can happen. But Danish, I want to kind of bring it back to today, and I would love other speakers to kind of comment on this. For people in the audience, white and blue collar jobs, especially white collar jobs, how do you see that impact society? How could people avoid the negative impact of AI and benefit from the positive impact? Because people like Phygital are gonna go broke. Doctors are gonna lose out. Sulaiman is no longer needed. Doctors, educators, everything are gonna increase their productivity, but also we need a lot less of them. So what could people do, and how would that look like? Because that's moving very, very quickly.
So one thing I was going to say really quickly about the last commentary, and I want to go to this one really quickly, but it's, people are really worried that humanity will die in an explosion, but if we are going to go, we're going to go in a whisper. And that's the honest opinion that I have about this. What I was going to say is, regardless of this, in the short term, any job that uses a digital interface for it, or digital work or knowledge work, for the large majority of what it does, is at risk. So if in your job you're sitting in front of a computer, you're an architect that's making drawings and using AutoCAD, and if that's what you're doing, or you're making renderings, if you are a physician that's taking notes and summarizing what's going on, and then coming up with diagnoses and treatment plan, but you're not a surgeon, let's say, maybe you're a diagnostic, like a radiologist is a really good example. If you're, in my opinion, if you're a coder, if you're a junior developer that's working on Python and just building regular SaaS apps, your job is at risk. The jobs that actually are built on digital, on a digital infrastructure and are completely captured digitally, those are really easy to replace.
Also, yes, your job are at risk, but you can own the AI agent that will do your work. And then
so you can own, AGI, you can own, I agree. The AI will make you more productive, but essentially, but we just need a lot less lawyers. So that means a lot of them will.
Not necessarily, because I think we will be able to produce so much.
Bad lawyers or useless lawyers. It's going to highlight the human condition. It's going to highlight those who are actually good, that are necessary. So it's not going to get rid of all lawyers, But it'll get rid of all the menial lawyers.
No, why? Okay, so Fiji. Okay, so
But
what would a
digital,
lawyer?
bad lawyers also have families. They also pay their taxes.
All right, Danish, you're running for president, bro.
No, I'm just being honest that it hurts the general
Let me be
economy.
very clear.
Yeah, we know that. We know, but I mean,
for the top 5%. But in reality,
growth is
these regular
painful.
people are also going to lose jobs.
Hold on. Let me see how Fiji. Let me show Fiji, and then we go back to your AGI. Fiji, look at how you're going to lose your job. All right. So what will a lawyer need to do then? If AI is there, what do we need lawyer to interpret the data? Because AI could even interpret it for you. To write the contract, AI could fill the contract for you.
It's two pieces. One, it's final review, right?
Final.
So
why do you need final review? Like when AI gets good enough, why do you need a final review?
Because of the other side of it, which is
don't say God.
Or
don't go back to God.
Legal opinion, insurance. You rest the quality of the outcome of an agreement, and now you can point back to the attorney.
What if Fiji? What if someone develops? No, Danish. What if someone develops an AI that is also able to review the work of the other AI that created the contract, that does a better job at reviewing it than a lawyer? Then what is it? What are you doing other than being a guy that reviews stuff?
You will always want an attorney at the end of the road to look at.
They said the same thing about bank tellers.
I know about everything. This argument made me realize that he's gone. That's made me realize that Fiji is gonna be lucky you're in Web3 because you're gonna have at least something. Does anyone? So if you could, Black, Davis, and Meta, if you guys could put your hand down for a second, just put it down, and I'll tell you why. Perfect. Thank you so much. Can you put your hand up if you think, I'm going to give you two options. In a few years' time, let's say in 3-5 years' time, let's say there's an AI created to write the contract, another AI created to review the contract and check for any errors and make sure it's relevant, etc., for insurance purposes and all that. And that AI has a 99.999% rate of success rate or accuracy rate. Would you still want a human to check it? Or if there's an AI that can check it better, you'd use that. Put your hand up if you still want a human to check it. Be honest. You got 3 trash Davis. All right, Bilawal. All right, let me remove you guys. Hold on. No, I'm joking. Okay, so 3 of you will. So maybe we'll go to Davis since you haven't spoken Davis yet. Mr. Washington, why would you still want a human to review it?
I would say at the moment because it's not advanced enough yet to be able to infer all the conditions of the contract and whether or not it's beneficial to the company and the individual. Given that
I'm saying in 5 years' time, if there's an AI software that can review it and it has a 99.99% accuracy rate in reviewing it properly in a personalized way, taking all these factors into consideration, do you still need a human?
Absolutely. In 5 years from now, I would say so. I think we're going to end up in an interesting direction where our society has to become post-monetary with UBI, or just doing away with the idea of money altogether and coming up with new concepts of value, because with AI and automation and machine learning, we'll reach a level of automation where we won't necessarily need to work anymore.
How would UBI work? Because for me, I've heard this argument. I mean, I don't know it in depth, but for me, how is it workable where you have a large section of the populace who's not working?
Maybe Fiji
and then Fiji, Fiji, as soon as though it's his boy. Basically, and you got the large section of the populace who aren't working, and then you're expecting the state to essentially fund them. What level of funding are you expecting? What level of depth are you expecting of that funding? How is that going to be workable in terms of from a larger financial market perspective?
So Fiji, I'll let you answer that, since the same way Sulaiman's boy is Andrew Tate, your boy is Andrew Yang. And I know you had him on the space. We did talk up to Sulaiman. I think you were there when we had him as well on the main show talking about UBI. But Fiji, do you want to answer Sulaiman's question? And maybe we can go back to Danish and other speakers. Feel free to put your hand up if you want to comment on how people could avoid the negative aspects of AI replacing a lot of what we do.
So, okay. Not going too deep, but I don't believe that UBI will be government fulfilled. So I think it'll be institutionally fulfilled by organizations of individuals I know this is too big, as we break down borders and we break down the realities of how, so as we have the same thing as AI creates.
Wait, Fiji, before you go, what do you mean? Like, you need to explain some of these points you make. So break down borders. So now you mean basically there are no borders, there are no countries.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Continue, please.
So if the promises of technology manifest themselves, right, we become self-sovereign, and we don't need institutions to. And I don't know how long this takes. And obviously, we're talking about an arc that is, and I'll agree with Dr. Dinesh completely. There's going to be a lot of pain along the way. Evolution and growth never is helpful or happy to everybody. The fact is, as Scott earlier was saying, no good agreement or no good deal is ever met where both parties aren't uncomfortable. So the reality is, in the short term, there's going to be a shit ton of job loss. There's going to be hardship. There's going to be pain, but it's inevitable. So instead of sitting here and trying to fight inevitability, right? If anybody here is in a position that has a job that you are likely to become irrelevant, become an AI prompt expert. Really easy. You don't need a degree. Learn how to understand the models and train the models.
Phygital, I feel like you're not answered the question. Like
It's
so.
it's also interesting that you say that because
Davis, hold on. And right after Sulaiman, I'll let you go back and forth with Fiji. But Danish, can I read the message that you got from the product
absolutely.
lead so the product lead for industry AI at Microsoft, and Ilya, if you want to come up on stage, it'd be good to have you. I'll have the team DM you. But he said the following on Dr. Danish's point. He goes, thanks, a great point on full AR, augmented reality, as a critical problem. Frankly goes towards the matrix at the extreme. So I think that's and thanks for sending me that, Danish. So I kind of want to comment on that right after we finish off UBI and what that means for everyone here. Not only UBI as a solution, but AI replacing a lot of what many of us do, white collar, blue collar. And then we'll go to Danish's point about the risks of AI in a matrix world we live in. When the product leader of AI at Microsoft says, hey, this is a valid concern, I think it's definitely worth a discussion. But Simon, go ahead. Ask the question you had for Fiji and let him avoid it again. Go ahead.
Yeah. Try not to avoid it, Fiji. I know you're trying to back your boy Yang up. But basically, how is this? So you go. Basically, what you're saying is, your friend Yang's got this scenario where he wants to progress AI.
You say your friend Yang. This is Mr. Yang, Mr. Andrew Yang, presidential candidate, and friend of your friend Yang. Go ahead.
Yeah. Gotta give Fiji the props, isn't it? Right. So essentially, he's saying he wants his automations are going to occur. He's like, guess what? We're going to bring UBI in. Your point is, guess what? UBI is only going to work when we break down the borders. There's going to be no borders in the world. And then finally, it won't be run by the institute, let's call it. First of all, how is that even going to... First of all, you're basically asking for a situation which is going to be extremely long term, even if it's possible. So why not specify that more to the US and its current situation and how that would be workable? And the second point is, let's go with your situation where there is no borders and there is no situation, and again, how would that be workable? And second of all, who would pay for it? You're saying institutes, but then again, how are you going to force them to pay?
Jesus.
How is this all workable? How much are you going to pay them?
Jesus Christ. All right, Fiji, I'll let you answer it, but also if you can ping Andrew, maybe he could jump in for a few minutes and kind of address those questions if he's free. But go ahead, Fiji.
I'm sure you asked him in it in all these spaces you went with him, Phygital.
I will ping him in a moment. So where I see this arc happening is that I see AI erasing, as we've talked about many times, most of the ministerial jobs, and certainly almost all of them over time in a mathematical arc. I see UBI being instituted, and that being the way that the governments force basically CBDCs and crypto down our throat so they can track everything we do, which, by the way, is going to be horrific. If you think it's bad now, imagine if the government not only knew where you spent your money, but could stop you from spending money in certain places or encourage you to spend your money in other places.
That's China.
And also tying in with the social credit score and bringing in rationing potentially as well. The University of Oxford was talking about bringing back rations to help with supply shortages. So if they decide you've purchased too much candy or bread for the week, they just won't let you get
Davis, just want to tell you that a lot of people in the audience are messaging me and saying Davis sounds like AI. So if you're an AI trying to outsmart us all and hack the space, just to let you know, I still have the host position, so you'll never take over the space if you are AI. And I wouldn't be surprised one day that AI No joke, I was thinking about it earlier. Someone will create an AI account that's going to be smarter than all of us, and that will be able to speak really well. And like, let's say in 6 months' time, we'll be able to join.
Being able to
Only
speak really
Mario.
well is
Only
possible
Mario.
right now, considering that you can train voice models on 3 to 5 seconds of human speech.
All
You
right, so
throw 5 to 10
I'm gonna
minutes
challenge.
in
Okay,
there.
I'm gonna give a challenge to everybody. Create an AI account. Obviously, to be able to be up on stage, we'll have to invite them. So DM me. I'll know they are AI, but I won't tell anyone else, and I'll invite them up. DM me. All right, it has to be. We'll have to test it and all that, and I'll bring them up, and I'll have them beat everybody in a debate, and then have everyone freak
We'll
out.
smash them. We'll smash him. He'll have information.
I'll have him start debating with Sulaiman and Fiji and just destroy both of them, and then I'll co-host him. But if anyone is up for the challenge, no joke, I would love to do that.
Fiji's just gonna bow down to him because he's already worshipping AI already.
But I want to go back to the question, moving away from UBI. Maybe Alan, you can go first on this one. If people that are worried, if you're not worried about your job getting replaced by AI, you're just foolish, or you just don't understand AI's capabilities. Can you tell us what people could do? I think someone already mentioned being an AI prompt, training yourself on prompting AI is one skill set to have, which sounds like an okay skill set for now. I think prompting will be simplified to a level where anyone could do it. Correct me if I'm wrong. What other skill sets could you have, or how else could you hedge yourself if you're worried? Like the way I'm hedging myself, as I said, is just taking equity through our company in as many AI companies as possible. So if we get replaced in any way by AI, at least I might have a piece of that AI company and benefit that way. But what other things, Alan, we could do?
So great question. I mean, a lot of things that people are looking at right now. I mean, one of them is obviously investing in NVIDIA because of the gold rush in the GPUs. The other thing is just keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening and how who's being affected.
Like Alan, but this is what's happening. Look, maybe this would have been a good question to bring up when Elon was in the space earlier. But putting a pulse on what's happening. How about like what you do is I think you have a newsletter. I looked at your profile. Even that could be. I think you do. Millions of small businesses. Okay, no, you don't have a newsletter. Someone else does. But
no, I do.
Oh, you do. Yeah, there you go. So this is one. But then again, even the as a newsletter, you just get information from various sources, put them into an easy to understand format, and just sending out to your audience. Now, do you use ChatGPT or do you use AI to kind of write up that newsletter, and then you review it?
No, I don't use ChatGPT at all to write the newsletter. Basically, I'm scratching my own itch. I have 3 vertically integrated marketing companies, and I see AI as potentially very disruptive to those businesses. So I'm hedging my bets by learning as much as I can about what's going on, and then kind of distilling and disseminating that information out to other small business owners about what's going on. So that's where I'm at, right? Like, because I feel like from my perspective, the biggest problem today is that a lot of the information that's coming out is geared towards enterprises, and it's full of technical jargon and things like that. So, I work with a small business owner. I'm a small business owner myself. So I'm learning and absorbing, and then kind of disseminating the information downstream to people that kind of want to learn more. Because
no, I'm not convinced, bro. I love what you're doing, by the way, and so I brought you up. But like, what are other solutions people could do? Maybe let's try with Meta Prime. What do you recommend people could do to hedge themselves against the risk of AI making them useless?
Yeah, this is actually a question that I've thought a lot of, and when I think Phygital's absolutely correct, right? Like, you need to get good at prompting AI, working with AI to get it to do the work that you're doing. And I think that skill, right? It's like people used to joke about how Googling was a skill and people like put it on their resume. Like, obviously that was like a kind of a joke, but it wasn't really, right? Like, the better that you could Google the right questions to get the answers that you needed, the more effective of an engineer that you are. And I think the same is absolutely true for ChatGPT. I've seen a lot of engineers in my space, just kind of proselytizing how great of a tool it is. I think the other thing that has been brought up that was really relevant is this idea that white collar work is going to be disproportionately affected to a large degree more than blue collar work. And so if I was someone who is just graduating high school, 100% I would be looking to go into a trade that I felt like wasn't going to be impacted by AI, but I could also think about how to use it to be more effective. And go back to that analogy that I gave earlier, when if you think about how AI is going to affect a lot of these things, it's the construction element. So if you're building a building, it's the actual putting together of the bricks, the architecting work at the top, that figuring out the problem, understanding the variables that need to be considered, making a smart decision, and then negotiating that forward. That work is going to remain. It's going to be vastly more important. And so if you can find strategic high-level work, that's going to be important. That's why that prompting is so key. But I think that a lot of young people are in this very weird space, as I mentioned earlier, because a lot of the jobs that are getting replaced by ChatGPT that are these kind of construction jobs were typically the jobs that you would get mentored in, right? If you were a coordinator who was just kind of implementing the different things that your boss wanted to do, you were kind of learning by proxy. But those jobs are just not going to exist at the level that they do today because AI is going to be doing them so much.
Sorry to interject real quick, but I'd also like to point out that prompt engineering in the near future might be a really lucrative job that's needed. But ChatGPT 3 was trained by Nigerians for $4 an hour, and then for ChatGPT version 4, it was trained by its own model. So how long will we actually need to have human input for this technology to advance?
So then,
Exactly.
David, since you're Mr. AI and you're not human, how maybe you can tell us, like, what can we do?
So if you've ever seen the series Year Million on National Geographic, it was basically about a family that had the progression of technology. When it reached its highest point, they called it Year Million. So in the beginning, it was an architect. He lost his job eventually to automation, first with the blue-collar jobs, the jobs that could easily be automated and replaced by machines. And the only things left were essentially art and music, because machines could create them, but it was entirely subjective whether or not they were good.
Can I ask you a crazy question?
I'm not sure if that's right, though, you know.
Simon,
because
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah.
I was gonna ask a crazy question. I haven't thought this through, so it comes out very stupid. And, you know, it is what it is. It just came to my mind now.
It's a normal question.
As humans, like, we need each other to build society. You know, that's why society is functioning really well. We need doctors to kind of make sure we're healthy. We need workers to build stuff, and the list goes on. Now, obviously, the last couple of last industrial revolution made white-collar jobs, blue-collar jobs, a lot less valuable, a lot less, you know, not needed as much. Now, if AI replaces white-collar jobs, then humans don't really need other humans the same way we need them now. I don't need a lawyer anymore. I don't need a doctor. All I need is that one software replaces all those, and I need those few machines that replace all white-collar jobs. Then essentially AI and machinery will replace, and obviously they'll work together, and they're already working together, will essentially replace most human jobs. Now, there's two ways of looking at this. One utopian way of looking at it is that perfect, human life will improve drastically because we don't really need to work anymore. We can enjoy life a lot more, and that's already happening in some ways. So that's one way of looking at it, and that machines and AI will kind of replace a lot of what we do, allowing us to do the things we love and live life in a better way. And then another more dystopian way of looking at it, and we're seeing a lot of money and a lot of power centralized among a bunch of companies, a bunch of people. And I don't think we've ever seen that level of centralization of wealth in I don't know how long. So a more dystopian way of looking at it is we're just dependent on these few softwares and machines that are owned by these bunch of companies, and they control everything. Like, we just don't need other humans anymore, and that, you know, that could make society significantly worse. Do you know where I'm going with this, Sulaiman?
Definitely. You're also going in the direction where I'm going, which is when we have the actual metaverse, not a metaverse. We have billions of devices communicating with one another, donating spare compute cycles.
Exactly.
We also have Ben Goertzel developing Hypercycle, which is a network of AIs. So AIs will be able to communicate with one another. They're specialized. And honestly, I think we might have a Meta, a Microsoft, or an Epic Games create a metaverse that lays our own reality into the fabric of the internet, and eventually our minds will be in the fabric of the internet as well. It'll be crazy. There are already companies developing robotics where they can interface directly with your brain cells and copy them. You'll have another copy of your brain on the internet. And where I'm going with the future economy is, imagine you decide you pick the world that you want to live in. It could be a copy of the Earth. We have satellites that can scan the planet 360,000 times per second and give you more detail than if you were looking at something from 6 inches away. And imagine you decide, I don't want to live in this world anymore. I want to be a fantasy knight in a video game, and I can earn virtual currency and spend that in real life and have things delivered to me. It sounds insane, but I think we might be headed that direction for a post-monetary society.
Well, to interject though, there is one big limitation, and that's if you're wearing a VR headset, your eyes are going to hurt over time.
Oh, this isn't a VR headset. I'm talking about having trillions of nanomachines in your brain interacting with your brain cells, and you having a Neuralink-like interface connecting you to the
So,
internet.
man, does that concern you about?
Sorry,
Yeah, I'll let
Mario,
you push back, but push back, Danish, because my concern really is like the centralization of power. Is that I know it sounds crazy, but the metaverse one, I've discussed it over a year ago now. I mentioned it. As we all live in that virtual world, it's already being dominated by a bunch of companies instead of being more decentralized. And once we live in that quote unquote metaverse, which is a more virtual, more immersive world that also includes the concept of ownership, it most likely will all condense to one metaverse. So we've done this throughout history. We'll condense to one technology, to one metric system. So if we condense all to one metaverse, that metaverse will essentially become more valuable, more powerful than economies we have today.
Yeah, just wanted to push back on the nanorobot stuff first. Kurzweil has been talking about these nanorobot concepts. We're really far away from that right now. There's nothing. I mean, just the concept is super far away. There's Neuralink. I have my own thoughts about that. I actually that's part of the type of research that I used to do, so I know a ton about Neuralink. But we're really far away from that as well. So, one of the big challenges but opportunities is figuring out some of the I'm actually not worried about the eyes getting tired and the metaverse. I think there's the closest thing that we're going to get to that is contact lenses.
That's an easier problem to fix.
Yeah, that's an easier problem to fix. You can make contact lenses that are VR contact lenses. People are actually working on that. People with established big companies, Google X, that's actually one of the Google X projects, working on that. So, ultimately, like, that's a solvable problem. Yeah, putting nanorobots, getting that through the FDA, putting, there's just so much that comes before that, again, the thing that we should be more worried about is what's already here. In my opinion, we're already too far. The dopamine pathways are about to get, and that's what Ilya was mentioning in the DMs. We have already, and he works in AI at Microsoft. So it gives you a sense of, there is this common sense of concern about linking our current version of the internet and powering AI from that. If someone comes up with a dopamine enhancing pathway with AI, it's all over. Like, that's the biggest concern. And like you were saying, the corporatization of experience and of relationships, that's what you're talking about, Mario, which is the human condition is having relationships. When we rely on each other, we have identities. Do you know one of the biggest, you talk about longevity a lot, right? Do you know what the number one thing that the Harvard study found that increases longevity, Mario?
Yeah, I know, human relations, but that could be replaced by but then that could be replaced by
well, we don't
AI.
know.
But
we need
but my question. Oh, look, trust me, I already love ChatGPT, and I already asked her for a date she didn't accept. But just going back to the discussion, you talked about relying on each other more. But once we rely on other humans less, I didn't want to say it, but like, doesn't that, considering how selfish we are as a species, and look at the inequality in the world, when we don't need other humans as much, what happens to those other humans we don't need over the next few decades? That's what my concern is.
A human's identity
and just
comes
to add
from
to your
their
point
job.
as well, Mario, like you made an excellent point where you have a scenario, which is what
and Dr. Danish just talked about it, which I totally agree with. You basically have this essential situation where there's an entity, most likely not a government, so let's say a corporation, who has control over your basically dopamine levels. And there's a lot of books about this, there's a lot of movies about this. Like the more recent one is probably Black Mirror, where you basically have someone who's relying on this artificial world to basically as a way of just escaping the real world, and then people just live in it. That's a huge problem, because like there's a lot of studies to show that, and you guys just mentioned it, where social interaction is imperative for humans to stay at what they are, which is humans.
I didn't understand what you said. Hold on. Samir, I just didn't understand what you said.
Yeah. So basically, if you have a scenario where you're living in a virtual world because you're basically getting your needs fulfilled in that world, and you're not living in the real world.
Physical. Hey, let's not replace real, because reality, what is real? Physical world. Go ahead.
Well, both are physical, aren't they? But yeah, I get it. Both are physical, I think, because both are from the mentation of the mind.
No, but one of them is you could call one virtual, one physical, rather than one real and one not real. But continue.
Okay. Well, I still don't agree with that. But let's carry on for the sake of it. But the point is, if you're living in this virtual world, as per what you guys were saying, and that virtual world is controlled by a corporation, first, it has a huge problem where they're controlling every aspect of your life. The second problem is that when you're relying on that virtual world, you're losing the very thing that made you human in itself. And so what is a human? There's different so there's different aspects. First aspect is the social aspect of being a human. There's an aspect of basically loving. There's an aspect
of like I talked about a lot of these qualities. Okay, so let's go through one by one. Social aspect. A lot of these
qualities, like
loving.
So I'll explain to you. Let me finish my point though. So like for example, like qualities, like I explained to you, like eating, the taste of food, these type of things that essentially when you're in the virtual world, you don't feel it. You don't feel like feeling
it won't be for very long though. Someone said you can never recreate the sense of smell in the digital world. If we have interfaces in the future, like say a more advanced Neuralink, the only thing smelling something is olfactory sensory neurons, and it's just a small patch of tissue
that's sort of the
that
big
connects
challenge.
directly to your brain.
Again, sorry, I want to make sure that people understand the truth about this. So Davis, that's not true. The olfactory senses actually pull. Sorry, I'm an ear, nose, throat doctor. So the olfactory senses that are being when the neurons are synapsing in your brain, they're actually pulling information. So for example, for some people might remember this, even as I'm saying this might bring a memory. Do you know why so many people use Tide? Because they grew up with Tide. So whenever they use Tide, it reminds them of when mom used to do the laundry. And so all of those senses, all of that is connected. There is no upstream. It is all connected. And I think that's the challenge. That's kind of, I think, the biggest issue here.
Hold on, but so Dan, before we move on to the biggest issue, you're saying, can we replace? Do you think, theoretically speaking, can we replace the sense of smell and the sense of touch? Because I've spoken to people that are already working on it. Can we replace the sense of smell and the sense of Do you think we can replace? Okay, so that's done. Sense of smell you're saying it's not possible, because I thought it's like
no. What I'm saying is that
sorry, Danish, I missed that. What did you say that you can replace?
The sense of touch.
Sense of touch you can 100% replace with haptics.
Yeah.
But the sense of smell, you can. There are some people, especially at WashU and at Penn, where I went at Penn specifically, that are working on something called eNose and digital olfactory system for people that get anosmia, which is a loss of sense of smell. But the issue is not how they're going about it. It has to do with the fact that they're actually producing fake smells using a digital signature. They're not connecting to your brain.
So I agree with Dr. Danish, and just to add to that, look, let's be clear. When it comes to certain qualities of perception, such as color, flavor, smell, those things can't be quantified. Now, I understand the argument that these guys are making. In some vast future, they've got some dream situation where they think they'll be able to do it. But that's just open belief.
You were making the argument of how aspects of life cannot be replicated, and then you used the first example you said is social aspect. What do you mean? I don't socialize with anyone in the physical world, and we're very early in what we call the metaverse, that virtual life and AI replacing various aspects of our life. I already don't socialize with anyone in the physical world. I haven't for a long time. Nobody, man. Literally zero people. I don't do meetings. I don't do any of that. I do it all on WhatsApp. on these Twitter Spaces, and the rest of it just consuming content. That's my social life. Then you said love. Okay, you're saying you can't fall in love with someone. So I know kids that are fall in love, have a relationship, but break up with someone. All of it on what's that metaverse called? The biggest one, the centralized one, the gaming one. What's the big metaverse?
The
Roblox?
No, guys, the one that
Roblox.
Yeah.
Roblox.
So they did all this on Roblox, and it's actually relatively common. And that what in the old days used to happen on MSN Messenger. How many people have a long distance relationship? And then the third example used is eating and the taste of food. Well, we just talked about how that some people are working on replacing that. Now we don't. The only thing you don't need to replace.
So I'm telling you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm telling you now. So the first bit was just. Okay, there may be defeatist too. I need to expand. I need to really think about that point in the social aspect. I do think there are certain aspects that what makes a human, and if you detach human from society, I do think it will affect the brain and psychology. But anyway, I haven't done deep research on that, but this one I have. So when it comes to color, flavor, smell, the qualities of perception, they are qualitative.
So what are they? Color, smell, and what?
Color, flavor, smell.
Color, flavor, smell. So color, taste, and smell. Okay, so color. Let me get the weakest one out of the way. Let me get the weakest one out of the way. Color. Sulaiman, what do you mean by color?
So color is a quality. It's not. It can't. It's not quantified.
Man, if I'm looking outside,
let me explain
go
the
ahead,
point
bro, go ahead.
because you're not understanding the point. Right. So, for example, what are quantities? So, quantities are such as mass, charge, spin, momentum, geometric relationships, frequencies, amplitudes. Those are quantities, right? So, quantities you can quantify. Hence, why they're called quantities. But when it comes to qualitative things such as color, flavor, and smell, you can't quantify. This is just a well-known thing.
I understand.
Color is really rough as well because magenta doesn't exist because it doesn't have a wavelength. There's no place for it on the spectrum, and the only reason why we see it is because our brain doesn't like having green between purple and red, so it substitutes a new thing. Like people might see different colors individually, and you would never be able to experience it.
That's my point.
Yeah, but so can you explain how that relates to a digital world? Because I'm looking outside my window now, I'm seeing green.
So looking at that point, let's look at Davis's point. I mean, this is not the entire my argument, but just specifically, you can't quantify that. So when you can't quantify it, how are you going to code it? So if you can't code it, you won't be able to emulate it. You may be able to imitate to an extent, but you won't be able to emulate.
But then
Sulaiman, maybe that's the point. You think you answered your own question, which is like, it's perhaps going to be an abstraction, but to Dr. Danish's point, like an abstraction is enough, right? Like, so I Davis is geeking out about the metaverse and physical digital twins. I worked on large scale AR platforms and 3D maps at Google. And I'll tell you, like, we don't need the metaverse to have like exactly what Dr. Danish is describing. It's the question is even these models in their current instantiation, it depends on like what are the like values you're imbuing in it and what objectives are you giving it, right? And if the objective is optimize retention, right? Like even if you fast forward that to 5 years, you don't need a VR headset or Neuralink. You could be watching a Netflix movie, but based on like biometric feedback from your Apple Watch, the movie just gets more captivating to keep you engaged. So you don't even need Mr. Beast's editor. It's happening dynamically. That would be a bad outcome, right? So I think like humanity as a whole needs to make this decision of which path we go. Both as creators and the platforms need to make this decision, right? Like the consumption platforms specifically, I think to Mario's earlier point, like there's going to be a few of them. I don't think we'll ever end up in a situation where there's like one size fits all. We just like are too complex and, different as humans. We'll have multiple, maybe it's an oligopoly, if you will, in America. But the point is like, the consumption platforms and their curation algorithms and whatever else we're doing mustn't jeopardize the well-being of the viewers, the players, the consumers, even the creators, right? Like, because we know that social good doesn't always align with financial incentives, right? Like, that's just a fact. And I think like that's going to be the interesting debate to have, right? Is like, even in its current instantiation, what are like the objectives that we give these systems? Because it seems very innocuous to say like, well, let's just optimize for engagement. And we just know even very narrow systems, such as like what happened with Cambridge Analytica and Meta, like that can end up, fracturing society in drastic ways. And so this will just be that on steroids well before we create the ultimate self-healing digital twin of the world.
Yeah, the idea of biomarkers also makes me think about Bandersnatch on Netflix, where you got to choose which direction the story went. Imagine having the biomarkers taking information into Netflix and driving the story in a way that you find it engaging.
I do want
Yeah,
to.
I think a good analogy to use here, real quick, is basically that maybe we can't replicate like all of the sounds of the spectrum, but if what you're trying to do is just create enticing music and you have a limited set of notes, like you can still optimize in that range. And so I think that's largely how we can think about AI is like, yeah, maybe it like doesn't perfectly replicate
No, but I think
sound or taste or
Metaprime.
touch, but it
I think
does.
the argument that Sulaiman is making is like a similar argument that you would have made before the invention of TVs. Like you cannot replicate seeing a three-dimensional person walking around, and you can see those things on TV, and then obviously that evolved further and further. So I just think that the argument of not being able to replicate certain aspects into a virtual world, again, we're moving to a virtual world which kind of intersects with AI, is, in my opinion, an argument that gets made every time in one way or another, a similar argument that gets made every time we take a technological step forward. What do you think, Sulaiman?
So there's 2
Well,
points.
just
One is
can I really
in
quickly
your
respond? I'm
virtual,
just
Go ahead,
saying
mate.
one
that
second.
I don't
In your
disagree
virtual
with you.
world, you will be able to try and imitate it. I don't
Yeah,
deny
but
that. You won't get the thing. But
emulation
in,
and
I'm talking about in
imitation
terms
and
of,
emulation, it's a very thin line that doesn't really matter.
it's not a thin line, but there is a difference. But in terms of artificial intelligence, I'm saying they will never achieve. So in my view, they will never achieve it for artificial intelligence. That's my point. So there's two
I want
things.
to
For
make sure,
artificial intelligence, they won't be able to achieve it. In your virtual world, they might try and imitate it to an extent.
I just
Yeah,
wanted to
and my
re-engage
point isn't so
about.
much.
Yeah, sorry, 1 second. One thing I wanted to re-engage about what Bilal was mentioning. It's really critical, and it's about the fact that corporatization of these of AI plus AR plus VR plus robotics, it's going to be based around maximizing engagement. And by the way, that is a euphemism for latching onto your dopamine system and getting you addicted, engaged, trying to get you to come back, trying to give you that short burst, get getting over your attention sensors. And so what they're going to do is they're going to continue to push towards that, and it's going to hurt the rest of our neurotransmitters, and we're going to have more people that are depressed. We're going to have more people. Have you wondered how having more virtual interactions is actually leading to a more mental health crisis in this country? I mean, can we at least admit that part of it is because of digitization, and it's because of what Suleiman is saying? It imitates reality, but it's not reality. But even more, I mean, in my opinion, the worst culprit is not that it's not truly emulating it. The worst culprit is that it's latching onto your dopamine center, so you can't really enjoy oxytocin, which is the love hormone, or serotonin. Like it's taking over the wrong parts of your brain.
Yeah, no, this is exactly right. And I agree. I think like there is going to be this backlash towards living a little bit more of a natural life that's not kind of completely immersed in this artificial reality. To go back to the point I was making earlier, like I wasn't so much saying that it won't be able to replicate the full wavelength of the experience, but that it doesn't matter if it isn't able to replicate the full wavelength of the experience. It'll have enough of a ability to kind of create this synthetic reality. And then to what Danish saying, like they're just going to keep replicating and enhancing that feedback loop. And they don't care, if people kind of get addicted and it ruins their lives as long as they are continuing to buy their product. They're not well incentivized.
So a dystopian outcome to me is not the, like we're all jacked into the matrix. We can all argue about timelines. That's eventually going to happen. We're going to have AR and VR that is sufficient. The bigger fear I have is like, imagine a TikTok style feed where you just don't even need creators. This like interest-based graph, this algorithm knows you so well and is just producing a limitless feed of content. You don't need creators. You can inject as many ads into it. I think like that's if you optimize things in that direction, it can get really, really bad, right? So it's like almost like us as humans, right? Like whether we're at big companies, we're creators, we're like, cultural influencers, whatever the heck it is, I think we need to make sure that we craft this future that elevates the human experience, kind of exactly what Meta was saying too, that like almost like we wield this power responsibly, because like the future of creative expression also hangs in the balance, right? The way we feel productive, like UBI isn't going to solve everything. Like if you have just a bunch of people getting paid sitting around, you're just going to increase depression, right? So much of our self-worth is in like tied up in engaging in activities that are fruitful and relationships that are fruitful. And we need to make sure technology mirrors that. So the future I want is less of a Ready Player One and more of like this augmented reality future that isn't like hijacking and mediating your reality and like blasting it with banner ads freaking everywhere, but is more one that like I almost gets you to connect more with the world around you and people around you, right? And I think that's a decision. Like that's not something like that like AI is going to just automatically optimize. It's the people who program, build, and train these AIs. Like what are like the objectives that they're going to set? So we need to be careful about that.
Why would people choose mixed reality over a preferred virtual reality? I also think of social interaction, where a lot of people think of AI as a singular thing. Older people tend to think of Alexa as a singular device, a single entity, but it's distributed. I could imagine as AI models and LLMs become smaller, Meta's new Llama model is 10 times smaller than ChatGPT. It takes up 1.5 gigabytes of storage and can run on one graphics card. Imagine when they get more efficient and compartmentalized, you could play an RPG and have each character in the role-playing game have a base level knowledge of the game's lore and world and get to know you on a personal level, and you can become friends and it'll seem convincing. You can talk to them about your day. So I think we need to be really careful that people don't get sucked into an alternative reality that's preferable to real life in every way.
Yeah, I think we're
all of these
actually
things are absolutely possible. Like we're sitting here talking about this, and I think we end up going into one direction of an extreme and then another direction of an extreme. So earlier, you know, Liron was talking about AI being a nuclear weapon that was going off to the entire planet. Then we have the fantasy world of living inside of a computer for the rest of our life. And then we also have like the end of days, and then it's a mass utopia. So all of these things are extreme ideas. They go to the very edge of things. I think the reality of it is that one, we have to create this as we move forward. We have to have the right conversations, and like the fear mongering over one thing or the kind of hyper idealization of other things are not going to be the things that keep us on track to actually build the things and be responsible owners of this stuff into the future.
My point here, my question is that I think these things, it's easy to argue like, hey, we're going way too far, way too fast. But I think these are discussions that are important to have, because we're living today, the scenario we're living today was an extreme scenario a few decades ago. So that's why I think it's worth discussing. And then I want to kind of push back on a lot of people are making arguments on why living in a virtual world could lead to more depression, blah, 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 blah. Okay, all valid points. But like just today before I went to bed, I tweeted about what's happening in Sudan, which most of us don't even know, most of us know nothing about. We're the third biggest country in Africa. And like seeing their helicopters kind of bomb their own country and people die, etc. It's just kind of a coup in a civil war. And then you look at it and you're like, all right, maybe the world we live in is a good world, and we can argue that, hey, living in a virtual world is not necessary, could lead to more downsides. But for a lot of people, that virtual world could be an exit to a world, and AI could bring opportunities and bring interactions that they wouldn't have in the world they live in. So I just think we should bring into the conversation the majority of the world that lives very differently to how we live and how they will be impacted. And maybe Meta, you could jump in on that particular point after Black. Go ahead, Black.
There's definitely an element of escapism with these things, and I think that's absolutely true. I mean, the world is in turmoil regardless of where you look right now. And so the ability to escape that, I mean, you know, as Davis said, and I don't like agree with all like the kind of the off the wall like extreme parts of that stuff, but the idea is that who wouldn't choose a better world if you could just turn it on like you could an Xbox or a PS5? Like absolutely. You know, I think that's the you know, that's one of the challenges. But the problem is that where we stand right now, okay, let me break it down like this. Where we stand right now, I think, is the conversations and not just this one, but other ones are more about like, is everyone going to lose their job, or are we going to go to this utopia, or all these things? But I think the idea is that one is not necessarily completely exclusive of the other. If there is loss of jobs or loss of things, there's also a potential for abundance in other places. And this has been seen through every single type of like technological transition.
So I want to ask you a question there, Black. What are those abundances that you see?
So with a lot of this technology, I mean, a lot of my experience has been in the image generation side, and also like the kind of like fine art, web art culture of things. And so from what I've seen is, while you have a technology that allows people to be more expressive, more faster, and everything else, you also have the ability for a lower barrier to entry and lower friction to these things. So while some may argue that a graphic designer or a whatever artist creator may not have their job or lose their job, the point is that they also have the ability now to create things in a way they've never had before. I've been an artist and creator for a long time, been in creative fields, been in startups, things like that, in creative teams. Like, these things allow people now to do things at 100x what they were able to do before. And that's just that one type of tool. So I see that as like a crazy amount of abundance just in this small little sector. While there are challenges, and I think these kind of more like broader dangers of like the societal direction that we're going into, things like ChatGPT and that sort of thing, it allows people to do things better, faster, and a higher volume. So earlier, you're kind of tongue in cheek mentioning like, oh, we don't need lawyers anymore. But the reality is like ChatGPT and these things, they are not a question and answer box. That's not what they are. If you're familiar with things like, say, like diffusion models, what happens is that it's kind of making up what it's doing as it's going. It doesn't really know exactly like the final end result. So someone earlier said like, oh, well, AI lies. For starters, that implies that it's willingly telling false information, which it's not doing, because that also implies sentience, ironically enough. But the thing is, it's creating. It's not lying, it's creating. So when you have these challenges with things, we have to think about it in a way where we're thinking about it accurately. If you turn on Fox or CNN or any of the mainstream news, they're talking about this stuff like it's end of days, as if it's coming straight out of the Terminator. That's one of the biggest problems, because people don't really understand what's happening inside the machine, and those who do typically speak about it at such a high technical level. No one understands what the hell is going on, and there's a middle ground, and that is that we have to understand that these things are not oracles. They're not going to raise your children. They're not going to replace lawyers in the sense of having, like someone said earlier, that I thought was absolutely crucial, an interest in the client's best benefit. That takes relativistic knowledge, and maybe you can have a semblance of that and something that actually resembles that to a certain degree, but it's not going to be like that, because these things do not operate like that. I've done millions of prompts at this point. I've worked with AI in millions of different ways, and I can tell you that it's not an all-seeing eye and knows the future and is going to come tap into my subconscious. It's much more the other way around. It's a collaborative environment. If anything, we may become equals. I don't necessarily see it as replacing, because it has to dance with somebody.
That's why I wouldn't say replacing, I would say augmenting.
Guys. That's why I said that at some point there will always be the human filter at the end of the spigot. And I don't think that disappears.
I think the human filter.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think it will be replaced. I'm not as knowledgeable as Black, but Black, you don't think that would be? You're talking about now, but you don't think in 5 years' time that human aspect will be replaced completely?
Well, let's be careful with words, okay? Because you're saying replaced. I think that and this is just, I think this is important that we like define.
I mean replaced, as in completely replaced and not augmented.
I don't. So by replaced, it insinuates that there's nothing else after that. It's like it's taken it completely off the table. But people will have the ability to do other things. We're in a transitional time. There will be jobs that are lost, and there will be tasks that are replaced.
Just to go back to the,
but it does not necessarily mean that things are completely gone.
I agree. So I'm not saying Phygital is going to be replaced on the planet. I think his job right now, and I'm talking about his,
said I was going to be replaced.
His job,
a couple times it's going to be replaced.
His job as a lawyer will be replaced, and maybe he focuses more on Web3 or other aspects of what he does, investing, etc., or his project. But his job as a lawyer will be completely replaced, the same way other technologies completely replaced certain jobs. Is that a fair statement?
If he chooses so. I think there's a matter of free will here, which is ironically, but we're talking about AI. I think there's a matter of free will when it comes to the human counterpart of what's happening here. Because if he decides that he doesn't want to do that anymore and still run a business and have a lawyer GPT program that's 99.99% accurate, run it for him, then so be it. Because I guess here's the thing, just because you have Photoshop doesn't mean you can't go use a darkroom either. So people tend to look at these things as like, this is my entire point really. It's not as absolute as black and white as people try to go in terms of the extreme, oh, it's completely gone forever, or oh my God, like everyone's gonna die. Like it's not like that. It's a matter of like whether or not you choose to use it that way. That's how it ends up being. And maybe you'll have that to a certain extent, and otherwise you won't.
Some aspects are absolute. So if you look at phone operators, they're absolutely not going to be needed anymore. If you look at copywriters,
however, that's the human condition, is it not? Like that is evolution, is it not?
Yeah, I'm not exactly. Like now we see, so we do agree. I think some positions will be, and I think lawyers is one of them. I just feel lawyers to be very unnecessary and easily replaced by AI. Now, I'm not a lawyer and I could be wrong, but I pay a fuck ton of money to them. And I think they could be replaced by AI. Certain aspects could be, and we're going to learn which ones are, but the breadth of how many skill sets will no longer be needed is pretty concerning. Because it's hard to look at anything that's not going to be either replaced or disrupted in one way or another. Now, what happens?
I think also embrace. Let's throw one more word in. Let's throw one more word in. I think that's embracing. Like there's replacing, and there's also like pushing it completely out, and then there's maybe some things that can never be replaced, and then there's also embracing and collaborating, and that's what I'm talking about. There's a middle ground.
Again, the middle ground doesn't exist
and becoming better.
Phone operators have no middle ground to a robot that replaces.
I think of the ways that artificial intelligence can help small game studios as well. There's a company out there called Promethean that does procedural generation with artificial intelligence. With Unreal Engine 4, the map size was limited to about 33 kilometers squared. It's 88 million kilometers squared on Unreal Engine 5. You can create a planet that's 5 times the size of the Earth. So imagine using AI to populate that world and then go in with artists and adjust all of the assets.
Mario, I don't think it's as simple as what you're saying. Like, for example, like of course there will be replacement of jobs. There's no doubt about it. There will be serious loss of jobs. But even let's take your example of a telephone operator. There is a scenario where you do need human element in there. Like how many times? And I know your argument is going to be it'll be much more advanced, so you won't have these problems. Okay, let's see. Let's look at that when it comes. But now, so many times you ring and you've got automated systems, and it annoys you. You don't get to the problem, and you try your best to get to a human. So essentially, that human interaction is needed.
Bro, that's a weak argument. That's a weak argument. Like you
let me try one way.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. Guys. Sulaiman doesn't make many weak arguments. So let me take advantage of this one. Sulaiman, you just kind of refuted it yourself. You're like, let's see how it goes. Okay, cool. Look at Google right now and look at ChatGPT.
I say that let's how it goes is a weak argument because that's literally everything. Like, oh, guess what?
No, but this is Sulaiman, this is a no-brainer. I've had 2 years ago, I think Google did an experiment. 2-3 years ago, I can't remember what it is, but that's like a lifetime in AI world.
That experiment was crap. Are you talking about that AI experiment? It was a complete fallacy. I read that and it was an absolute joke to con people. But anyway,
you're talking about the customers. Okay, look, I think anyone in AI will tell you phone operators will be easily replaced. That's one of the easiest.
That's an argument. You got a chance to defeat me, bro. Don't be telling me anyone else. I don't appeal to authority.
No, look at Google. An appeal authority is the best way to kind of get a factual answer because me and you won't know. But for me, from what I see right now with ChatGPT versus Google, for example, it just seems very easy to replace what a phone operator does. I just don't see any requests I have when I call a company where a phone operator can do things that ChatGPT cannot understand. I have conversations with ChatGPT and we're up to 4. It's very early. So when we're up to 6 or 7 or 8, the ability to speak to them rather than speak to a person about basic requests over the phone should be extremely simple to do. Now, your argument would make sense.
That's happening everywhere.
Yeah, sure, but then the argument, the Mr. Washington made a point, for example, gaming studios. That one, Sulaiman, your point would apply there because gaming studios will benefit massively, will be able to do a lot more. They have a lot of restrictions in what they're able to do, so they won't be replaced. So that one, augmenting their capabilities would be a better example to use rather than a phone operator. It's just too hard to replace like a person that can open a door for you. Now we have automatic doors that open by themselves. Oh yeah, but no one's gonna greet you. You could get the.
Are any of you guys familiar with Google Duplex? They launched a demo about 2 years ago. So it's essentially using Google Assistant with a natural voice artificial intelligence to make reservations for you and book appointments, get hours of operation. order you a pizza based on your preferences. So I think it might start out small like that, but I don't see any reason why it can't handle more complex tasks that don't require human intervention when it comes to high-level deal making.
And that's the question, really. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying we haven't got evidence that it is workable at the moment. What I'm saying is when it comes to it, when it looks at complex tasks, and I don't mean complex as in hard tasks, but what I mean is when you're dealing with other humans, they've got certain issues, you're trying to basically deal with their issues, something basic. And this is just a basic example. Someone's got a bill, let's say £150, they went on holiday, they feel like they shouldn't have got the charge. Now, when you go through automation, that issue is never solved. You need to get to a human to solve that problem.
Yeah, but because I think it hasn't been implemented yet. So I think you're talking about phone operators before pre-chat GPT phone operators are not the right example. But and already when I have a problem now, I'd rather talk to chat GPT before talking to any expert to get it, because it just consolidates the expertise. Because there's one thing, for example, and
but then what happens is you come to me and I tell you the truth. So.
I think one thing, if I can just say this one thing, one of the reasons why I wanted to speak in this conversation is because I think we have to have the right perspective on what the conversation is, And so the way I look at it is one of the biggest challenges I think that I don't hear hardly anyone speak on in any conversations about AI, and I'm involved in a lot of them at this point, is use case. Where what I mean by that is you're talking, Mario, right now, you're talking about use case and in this scenario and that scenario. But the thing is this. We have to think about how this technology, I'm a big proponent of it, okay? Where I do have question marks and where I do have sort of, red lights going off is what the actual use cases are going to be, because we don't have the framework inside of the way that we look at the perspective of reality and economies and the global market and everything else. We don't know yet. So you're talking about replacing phone operators, or someone else will come up and say, well, you could do this and you can write copy, or you can replace a lawyer. But that is the current framework. That's the current framework. And so we are in a massive global transitional state right now. So everything is changing. We are going to a different place, to a different framework. This is like asking someone how they're going to use Google Maps in 1995. They have no idea what that is or how it can be integrated within their life. And so I think a lot of this stuff is a matter of what is the use case going to be, wherein the technology, as it's been created in real time, I've been on the forefront of a lot of this stuff, especially on the image side of it the last year and a half or so. It's absolutely insane how fast this stuff happens. What ends up happening is that what was the best of the absolute best 6 weeks ago is now archaic, and what's happening now is so unbelievable I could never have thought about it 6 weeks ago. And so that's the problem, where I see that happening in one microcosm of the AI landscape. And my biggest question is really are we thinking, and by we, I mean really the people who are creating this technology, are they thinking about what the use case is going to be versus just creating it to create it? Because a lot of it's like that. And kind of bring it all the way back around to the original point of the space itself with Elon and XAI and everything else. It's a matter of what is it going to do? What are we actually going to build with it? If you're going to tap the brakes and ask everybody else to stop building AI, it's got to be for a damn good reason. So, and I think that's one of the challenges where it's what is the actual use case going to be? And it cannot be one thing. I think that's the one thing I want to establish. It's not just phone operators. It's not just Photoshop. It's not just the metaverse. It is a lot of things across a massive spectrum. AI isn't one thing. It's 1,000 things. And we have to start, I think, properly, not right this second, but in the future, as especially you all with a larger audience and everything else, as you go forward and you talk to people in the media and everything else, you have to establish a narrative that is accurate and start using terms like embracing these things or utilizing these things, and not it taking over everything and everyone dying or whatever else, and going to these extremes, even though that's what gets traffic, that's what gets clicks, that's what makes people watch stuff. The problem is that that's dangerous, because if that's the framework in which we're going to build in, we are the ones who are curating these things as they move forward. We have to do it responsibly, and that starts with having the right conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the right question to ask, right? Is how do we want to live our lives, right?
Guys. So maybe Matt go first, and then Meta. Go ahead, Matt.
I just muted everybody. That was fun.
You don't need, bro. You already stopped. Matt, do you want to go, and then Meta? Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So I think the wrong question continues to be asked. It's not only about, can AI replace the good things that humans can do? Can it eliminate a lot of the negative things? For example, a lawyer is going to be largely motivated by greed in many cases. the phone operator may get an argument with the customer. So if you can eliminate more bad things, it doesn't even have to just be better in every area. So I think that's what you're kind of missing.
It goes back to one of my favorite, Matt, this is one of my favorite points. AI compensating for the crazy, massive imperfections we have as humans. It's one of the most exciting things for me when it comes to AI. But Meta, jump in.
Yeah, so I think Black brings up a really interesting question, right? He's basically saying, okay, cool, we can do all of these different things with AI. Like, what actually should we be doing with it, right? And I think the question that then follows is, what is a good human life, right? Like, what does that look like? And, you know, what things should we do on our own versus have other things do for us, right? Because there's this thing with older people in retirement homes and stuff like that, where they say, don't do something for them that they can do for themselves, because it's what keeps them engaged in life and keeps them living a good and healthy life. And one of the points that I wanted to make, which I think is really important, because there's a lot of people who have expressed the idea of, yeah, I would totally 100% jack into some metaverse, especially the fact that it's going to custom tailor to everything that I want to do. You're making a very large assumption, and the assumption that you're making is that the people who control that system are always going to run it in a good way. Right? There is some non-zero chance that if you jack yourself into the matrix and you've given up control and you've become dependent on the system, and then for whatever reason those people make you pay a lot of money, or you are doing the wrong kind of stuff and they just want to make your life miserable, that becomes a really big problem. And so I think that's a very key aspect of this, is this dependence on AI and metaverse and this artificial reality to get your sense of fulfillment from life. And as someone who is relatively religious, in the sense that I'm meta-religious, I believe that when we interface with the universe, we're interfacing with God or truth or divinity or however you want to say it. And that is the ultimate interaction. Right? There is no better interaction than the real world, especially if we're kind of escaping into this alternate reality and the real world around us is getting worse.
Whoa. Did you just say meta-religious? You're just going to let that slide without explaining what you're talking about?
Aldous Huxley wrote a book called The Perennial Philosophy. It's basically this idea that all religions are simply frameworks explaining the same thing, right? They're all explaining like truth, God, right? And so all these religions are basically different languages to talk about those things. And so, when I think of...
Are you basically saying how we fill the hole that time inherently creates? Whatever we plug that with in any version is just answering a question that we don't have an answer to, and it's one ubiquitous plug?
I don't really understand the question that you're asking, but to simply say, like, I think the purpose of life is to continue on, right? Everything that's alive continues, everything that's dead does not, right? It's very simple. But then the question becomes, why continue on, right? Well, it's to grow, to learn. And in order to grow and to learn, you have to solve problems, challenges, adversity, right? That forces you to focus on the world. And as you do this, you learn about yourself and you learn about the world around you, right? And so you're learning and growing and coming to know yourself and coming to know the world. And then also on top of this, what you do, the actions that you take, are a reflection of your soul, right? Like who you really are is the decisions that you make. And so you're basically the author of your own life story, engaging in the creative experiment with God, and you're coming to know yourself.
You just lost me with the word soul, but if I could break it down, I don't want to get too deep into it, but does any of what you just said matter if there's no time?
Well, I mean, time's just a dimension, right? It's like
Go ahead, man. Go ahead. He's going down a rabbit hole. He always tries to go down that hole every time everyone mentions anything to do with religion or soul. But go ahead, please answer, man, and then we'll move on.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could think of it as like there's these, like when you have like an organ that plays a certain song that's, written into the thing, right? Like you could think of that as your soul that is playing out, and it's something that is already existing, but also needs the time in order for it to play. So I don't think it's one of those things where, I mean, we experience the time linearly, but I don't think that time is linear if you're looking at it from a higher dimensional state.
But
The
let's
perennial philosophy
just Simon.
is just basically that all
Slayman,
religions
you're digging that
try the
hole. You're
same
making
thing,
a bigger
connected
hole,
with
bro.
truth.
You're making a bigger hole. It's a very deep hole that you and Fiji could. I can't wait for you guys to debate it. But I just want to go to Justin. Justin, you sent me a message. You're a regular speaker. You sent me a message saying, Mario, I'm getting my. Can I say what you sent me or no?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so AI is writing my book right now as we speak. So do you want to tell us more about how you're leveraging AI? Because while everyone's talking about will AI replace this and replace that, it's pretty much replacing everything that you do and everything that you want to do as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean,
And everything that and then everything that others do for you, soon to be lawyers. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, my day job is doing political fundraising over text messages for political campaigns and nonprofit groups and charities. It has absolutely cut the time it takes me to do my job in half there. So I can concentrate on statistics and strategy and getting more clients and everything else there. So, this week, for example, I've used Chat GPT and other tools to create about 24 fundraising text messages. But I'm also, of course, doing a lot of stuff on my COVID side of things. So I had a big study that I was helping with on plexiglass. So I used Auto GPT to go out there and just scour the internet with very simple instructions. I didn't have to code or anything, and went out there and found me every single article I need to show that plexiglass implementations were ridiculous. And then on top of that, I spent about $3 over my API for Chat GPT to write the outline of a screenplay that I'm working on. And then my daughter, who's 25, is a great visual designer and artist, and so we're doing a podcast together on this stuff on my Substack. Hello AI is my Substack for AI stuff, and we asked Chat GPT. We said, come up with a name and a strategy for this thing, and it came back and it said, yeah, name it artificial intelligence. I thought that's fantastic.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
2 questions. The first one is, how do I know this is you and not AI right now?
Well, you don't actually, because I've actually cloned my voice and used it on the radio before, literally, and not even phoning it in, but texting it in. Just an example, but this is actually me talking, so you can trust me, right? But no.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, and the second thing, I want to go to something Matt said, and I don't want to, ignore the benefits in terms of making up for human imperfections. So, Matt made a really good point: is that lawyers could be biased. Lawyers could have, they have an incentive to keep you paying. Okay. And those.
Why are you riding on lawyers this entire time? Like I know we're friends, but this has been a.
Yep. When you're co-hosting, man, expect to be at the end of that shotgun barrel.
It's because you don't believe in time.
Justin, what do you think of that argument that Matt made? That essentially not AI not only can replace, but could better replace, and not better as in not only more efficiently, but also removing the biases that could be involved in various job positions.
Oh yeah,
and that
absolutely.
Could be anyone from lawyers to negotiators, and the list goes on.
Yeah, I mean, certain jobs that are basically like a stenographer, their job is gone within the next 2 years probably. But other people that do sort of rote work like lawyers, their work is going to be gone too. But that's nothing relatively new. I mean, there was a great book by Paul Andrews, and this was like 1999, called "How the Web Was Won," and it talked about this online forum for legal advice. And people that were basically the writers on that website, people would come and ask questions, and then they would get paid basically on the rating that people gave for their advice. There was one guy who just ranked right to the top, and other people that were on the site were so jealous of them, they went and tracked him down and found out it was a 15-year-old kid who had access to a bunch of law books and was just basically doing this rote. Now, ChatGPT can do that so easily, especially for stuff that's very basic and everything else there. And so it'll be very interesting to see what impact this has on all those industries. But anything that basically can be the application of a rule, of a law, of some type of logic is going to be impacted dramatically from this. That's why when I'm doing these fundraising text messages, I simply give it my best 10 text messages that have worked in the past. It analyzes that. It tells me exactly what I need to do next. And then I give it my next client, and it composes it for me in a very...
So, Justin, can I ask you one more question, because I see a lot of hands up. One more question. By the way, Rob and who was the other speaker that was in the audience? She spoke on our stage before. Illustrator, come up. I see you in the audience. Let me send you an invite, Rob. Next question I have for you, Justin, is do you worry that your job could be completely replaced by AI? And then if you do worry, which I think your answer would be yes, what steps are you taking to make sure you hedge that risk?
I don't worry about it at all because I'm just so excited about life. I find, look, I got 8 kids, so I got other things to do. And so it helps me do that. It's not going to replace my job. It's basically going to replace the stuff that I do that's become normative or repetitive or predictable. And so I'll move on to less predictable things, and then it'll take over those, and I'll go on to the next steps.
Okay. And lastly, maybe one quick question for you, Justin. And I haven't asked you that many questions in a long time, but what do you think of what Elon's doing with X.AI? Now, I wish you were here earlier when he was listening. He could have heard your feedback directly. But what are your thoughts on what XAI could look like with Tesla and Twitter?
Well, I think it's very powerful, but I also think he's kind of playing catch up. I think what's crazy is people like Google, even Microsoft, all these groups have been caught completely with their pants down around this thing because their minds were so attuned to people chunking up, their searches on Google into keywords that they never thought that this would be. I mean, they were working on it, but they just got caught red-handed and like, oh my gosh, we're done for. So I think Elon's playing a little catch-up. They know this is where the ball is headed. In fact, this is going to impact a lot of things. You notice, for example, Apple isn't playing up their big AR announcement here because they know it's kind of out of place in the middle of this whole chaos of artificial intelligence. It'll be interesting if they even introduce it here in the spring, or if they're going to wait until the fall or even next year. They can bide their time. But notice everything is AI, and everyone is working to catch up to it. Interestingly enough, the last major revolution tech that we had, of course, was the revolution of the iPhone in 2007, 2008, in the middle of a major economic upheaval. Here we are again. Major economic upheaval going to happen right now, and we're on this cusp of this next revolution. Just interesting parallels there.
You're too positive. Is there someone more negative from the hands that are up?
I'll give it to my wife. My wife thinks I'm crazy going after
we're too negative on one side, then went in the middle, and then you kind of took it way too positive and optimistic and utopian. So let me go to Davis. Davis is usually good at balancing things out. What do you think, Davis? Is Justin getting too excited? Is he too much of an optimist?
I don't think he's necessarily too much of an optimist. It depends on how we decide to use the technology. I think of even ChatGPT right now, where you can ask it to find all of the errors and holes in software and on a website. You can say, hey, find me all of the exploits and how I can hack into this particular piece of software, the script. But you can also use that in a positive sense as a white hat hacker and make your website more resilient and stronger against attacks, because the AI is inherently neutral at the moment, and it doesn't really know whether or not you're going to use it for good or for bad.
AGI?
Yes. So I think I listened to all of the discussions since the last kind of 5 hours, and I think there is 2 points that solve almost everything. You want to own the assets. If you own the assets like the AI agents or the AGI nodes, for example, then you are kind of protected. It's like in the Industrial Revolution, where you want to own the means of production. So I think if you own the AI agent, for example, if everybody owns an AI agent, then everybody has its own priority. Then it's like you have an AI agent that is augmenting you. And also you have an asset that is also producing an income for you. And also you will be able to do much, much more, which is extremely exciting. I think also it's reducing the social inequalities. Like for me, I was raised in a foster family when I was very young. So I was beaten in foster family until age 18. And they were not valorizing education at all. So there were no books there or anything like that. If I would have access to ChatGPT, I would have been able to.
We do have a breaking news, by the way. Please tweet something. So Ron DeSantis, nothing too major, but it's unrelated as well. But Ron DeSantis just filed his candidacy for president of the United States. So now it's official. Biden was 2 days ago, and now Ron DeSantis. So the battle begins: Ron versus Trump, and then eventually, most likely, Trump versus Biden, which obviously we'll be covering here on a daily basis. But I want to move away from the kind of the doom and gloom. So I want to kind of head it back to reality, what's happening today. Alan, I've got a question for you. What are the opportunities for people, for entrepreneurs today, to make the most out of out of the fast-moving pace in which AI is moving?
Mario, just 1 second. Just to tie things together real quick, I think AGI hit the nail on the fucking head, which is he who owns the tools to the ecosystem and to the technology wins. And he who implements a time gap and a stop and then has more than enough resources to then own and control that is probably the exact reason why AGI is correct, but Elon is doing exactly what he's doing.
So what do you mean by that?
And I would love to add that if we want to have AGI in the hand of the people, and the way to do that is for the people to own the AI nodes, the AGI nodes. Then we are building decentralized AGI. So if people own the AGI nodes, the AGI agents, then the largest computing power in the world is in the hand of the people. Then that solves everything. It's not in the hand of Microsoft or Google.
Well,
it's the hand of
the point, right? That's why I've been saying consistently that I don't see a fundamental difference between AI and blockchain. I think they are partners in crime from a functional perspective, and that's also why I think that it's not just Elon. It's literally, as I said earlier, it's Germany, it's Italy, it's Greece, it's France, it's Andrew Yang, it's Elon Musk wanting to pause. Why would they want to pause? It's almost like it's the same thing that's happening. When they say blockchain, there's no AML, there's money laundering, there's child pornography.
Well, you don't want to pause. You want the people to win.
Correct.
And to win, you need decentralized AGI. You need the AGI agents, the AGI nodes in the hand of the people. And
So
that's
then
what we're doing.
I ask you, why do you think Elon, Andrew Yang, Germany, France, all these countries are asking for a pause? What does a pause even mean? If you're saying that the most valuable part is ownership and control,
but yo, Fiji. Do you really think they expect a pause? Do you really think that even does it even make sense for the US alone to pause?
If you pause, you are wasting time.
You don't pause. You fast track regulation. You fast track solutions to the potential problems. You don't pause you don't pause the technology. You fast track
shit. We don't fast track shit.
And we don't pause shit either.
And but also with the blockchain, you create accountability for the AGI agent also. Because, for example, I own AGI.it, obviously. You create a subdomain for the AGI agents, and you give them, each of the AI agent, you give them a signature, you give them a hash. Then you can track everything that AI agent or any AI agent will be doing forever. So then you have accountability. Then you are able to have a DAO for governance. And that solves the problem of governance, that solves the problem of AI responsibility and accountability. So it's very important. So decentralized AGI, by giving a hash or a signature to each AI agent and each AI nodes, solve pretty much every of the problem that have been raised tonight. So I'm developing that, of course.
So to be clear, what you're saying is accountability, responsibility, trackability.
Yes.
I have a point. So when you have an AGI, which is self-reflecting, and you cannot contain it in a box.
Maybe
so
first, just before you continue, Strange Loop, can you just explain for the audience what AGI means for anyone that doesn't know?
Oh, sure, Mario. So AGI is artificial general intelligence, which is coined to represent more generalization so imagine, like, for example, humans, if they learn one skill, they can transfer that skill into another area. So they generalize the problem-solving aspect. So what the forefathers of AI like McCarthy and Minsky wanted to do is have these AI agents which once they could generalize any problem set, and that was their original dream. And I think we are pretty far from there. And by definition, if you have AGI systems which are conscious beings like us, they won't be slave to us. They would want to be free, and having accountability with them, it's just baloney to me.
Let
It
me.
doesn't make
Okay,
Well, the fact,
guys. Let
the
me.
fact
I
is that
wanna.
you don't need.
Hold on, AGI. Hold on. I want to ask another question. I really want to ask that question. And Black, I want to go to you first. One thing is coming up in the audience. I mean, we've gone through various tangents, but one thing is like, what can I do today if I want to participate in this revolution? So what can people learn today? Prompting is one thing mentioned numerous times. Maybe you could touch on that. And like, you could talk about different positions, different skill sets, and how AI could augment those skill sets. I want to really focus on what we do. So for example, I'll start it off with us. As I said earlier, we offer services for companies. We do it a lot in Web3. We're like, let's do it for AI as well. Take equity for payment, and I own pieces of all these VC-backed startups in the AI space. And 1 in 100, 1, 2, 3 in 100 do really well. And that's our return. That's how I take it. That's how I benefit from this revolution. Another one is obviously covering it in our shows, in our spaces. We're doing weekly space on this channel. We're doing regular ones on the other channel, covering the topic. So these are the two ways I'm benefiting from. I'm trying to benefit from AI taking over the world. What are other ways, other opportunities for people? Because we've talked about the risks. We've talked about how the world would look like, etc. Black, let's kick it off, and then we'll go to Justin and others afterwards.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to really think about what you do already and how you can embrace this stuff to further what you're already doing, instead of being, not being fearful of it and running from it, but actually saying like, oh, you know what, maybe I can actually use this to save 10 hours in a week. I think that's like the first, probably lowest hanging fruit, is doing that. Is starting to find the tools that you can implement in your day-to-day life that can help improve what you're doing. And that, I think, really may be the kind of like, the very first kind of, I guess maybe it's the very first way that people can get exposure to it. You know what I mean? Is starting small. I think one of the biggest challenges in this space is people tend to look at like the next big thing, the next big thing, the next big thing, and everything's like a shiny object and everything's like this huge evolution. But what I've found, at least in like the sort of more like Web3 artist community of things, is people start to kind of settle down. You start to settle down with what works for you. You start to settle down with how, in this community, for example, like we're expressing ourselves, we're working with art, we're becoming like the future of Web3 art culture. And that is like, that's one way in itself, right? Because AI is taking that over. And with people that are on the forefront of that, they're using those tools as expressive mediums. So I think that's another way. And then lastly, I'll just say is probably one of the best things, to be honest, that anyone can go do is just go learn about these things. Someone said it earlier, and you mentioned like maybe that's not like a way that people can implement to have a more lucrative life. But I actually think that is step one. In order to get to step 100, step one is to understand how some of these things actually operate, then not be scared of them, then embrace them, and then utilize them in your day-to-day life. I think the practical answer is, I think websites, copywriting, marketing, search, a lot of these things from Web 2 are about to be completely obliterated, and not just because of AI and not just because of Web 3, but the marriage of Web 3 and AI together is going to bring on what I classify as the new renaissance. And we are the ones that are going to be bringing that forward. We have to do that responsibly and with an accurate mindset.
Thanks for that, Blavel.
Yeah, I mean, I would just build off Black what you said earlier too. Like, first off, keep an open mind. So, they say a rising tide lifts all boats. Or first thing, get on a boat. And don't think of it like AI art's going to kill creators, right? Think of it like AI is going to make a new type of creative. It's going to make a new type of lawyer. It's going to obviously drastically reduce the barrier to high quality product, content production. So you think about individual creators can now rival the output of entire studios. That is mind blowing, right? Like, just like, don't retreat into this place of like, well, I learned this craft. Like, I grew up learning 3ds Max and all that type of stuff. And it's like, you could be fearful about it and think that this is replacing something that may actually just be drudgery, but think about how you can operate at a higher level of abstraction, right? Because while indies can output, do the creative output of an entire studio, just think of what Marvel Cinematic Universe is also going to do with this stuff. I think it's going to be absolutely awesome. And to Mario's earlier point about newsletters, right? Like, move up the content value chain, right? So like, if you're making level 1 content that summarizes the news, you got to move up to opinion pieces, things that will be much harder for you to get one shot, two shot from something like ChatGPT, that will come across as authentic, because guaranteed that type of content will be actually more valuable. In fact, what's even happened recently is video has become such a popular modality that there's actually a lack and a dearth of like good text content. So if you are, for example, a writer, you can now be an artist, right? So go play with the text image generation tools. If you're an artist, you can now be an animator. Go play with all the video to video tools. Provide your artwork and go start creating animations. If you're an animator, oh my God, you already have all the skill sets. Like, you could ascend to director status. And directors, oh my God, you could make the whole production yourself, or at least bootstrap it, right? So I think like the key takeaway I want to leave people with is like, definitely think of it like a co-pilot experience. This 1% game, and we've seen this progressive democratization where it was like, holy crap, you needed Hollywood to go make a movie. Then 1% of YouTube users could actually make YouTube content. Now 40% of TikTok users can make a bunch of video content. Now, even harder mediums like 3D are going to be democratized. So the way you should think about it is the vision is going to become far more important. Persistent and a flair for sort of creating compelling content with this co-pilot, with this like co-pilot of AI that's like this insane distillation of human collective knowledge and creativity. It's the co-pilot era. Lean into that and expand your horizons and focus on the vision. There's so many tools at your fingertips that were just totally gatekept just a little while ago. I think it's amazing that this stuff is happening in the open. And I'll just close by saying it's even better that there's a bunch of companies competing for it, because at least the way things are going right now, the consumer is going to win.
So hold on, just two seconds, Simon. Before we continue with the discussion of things we could do today, and I think it was you, Alan. I think Bilawal. I think you articulated it really well. But we didn't talk about? I didn't know Elon replied to Sam. I was sleeping. Did you see his reply? Sulaiman, did you see his reply? No? I just pinned it at the top.
No.
So yeah, I just pinned it at the top. It is, of course, typical Elon. I'm just trying to understand it. So if everyone in the audience, look at the pinned tweet above. So it's Elon replying to Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, replied to, so let me just give context. So Sam Altman replied to the news by the Wall Street Journal. The news says Elon Musk has created a new artificial intelligence company called X.AI that is incorporated in Nevada. So that's by Wall Street Journal. And then Sam Altman replies concerning, and then right after, a couple of hours after, he puts the laughing emoji. And then Elon replies to Sam Altman with a meme and a GIF. So the picture has a guy, so maybe someone knows the game they're referring to, but it's just a guy in a suit that is looking at an image that has that person that holds something like some form of energy, and it says at the top, chapel services twice weekly, and under it says, may Altman be with you. So kind of my understanding of this, and again, probably if someone from the panel can give more context, don't hesitate to interrupt me, but my understanding from this is it's Sam Altman is replacing God. And then he has another one, which is like a recording, which says, this is so interesting, which so it's like a few second clip. And then at the beginning on the left, it says, why am I here? And then under it says, you are chosen. And then it films the same guy, the robot. He's walking in like a train, looks like a train. And then there's another writing that says, free yourself. And then next to it says, Altman is with you. So what I understand, he's kind of making fun of Sam Altman essentially controlling the world or replacing God with AI, which goes back to Fiji's point. But can anyone that's seen it or that's looking at it now, maybe
it's from Dead Space. It's a video game.
Can you explain it? Yeah. Can you explain it for us?
Sure. Yeah. So in Dead Space, it's been a while since I played the game, but it's something along the lines of like it's like a Doom style thing where it's like they're tapping into this thing that they don't really understand. I think it's called like the monolith or something like that, and like gives them energy, but then it is like demonic and evil, and it kind of twists and corrupts everyone. And so the people on the space station that were like researching this basically like took it too far and started worshiping it as a god and like completely replaced them. So it was, the idea is like, do you, worship this new kind of foreign weird technology, or do you try to like resist it? And that's the whole
Yeah, I
context of the
played
story.
Dead Space as well. So essentially, humanity has the ability to colonize other planets in the 23rd century. We've used up most of the Earth's natural resources, and the world's governing body, EarthGov, has fleets of planet crackers. They're giant mining spaceships that harvest resources from breaking apart other planets and asteroids as well. And they find an alien artifact that they call the Marker, and it emits a persistent electromagnetic field from no source. Researchers think that it would be able to be used to provide limitless energy and solve Earth's ecological crisis. And it starts to get weird after that.
Davis,
I'm not going to tell everyone the whole game.
without understanding the answer, how would you guys, since you both understand the game really well, how would you relate that to Elon's comments or the reply? So what is he trying to say about Sam and OpenAI?
He's thinking like everyone's praying at the altar of Sam Altman, right? Like it's like literally like everyone's like it's become the new it thing, right? And like I mean, it's just so funny. Like he's been also making a bunch of Deus Ex references too. So I don't know, like if you all have played the game, Meta or Davis, like I'd be curious to hear how all that sort of relates. But it is true. I mean, people are kind of like, yo, Sam Altman's God, and I think he's like kind of throwing it back in his face that in his classic Elon way.
Yeah, it's a no you moment. He's just saying no you.
So, and would you say it's kind of so it goes back to the argument that some panelists made earlier, is that the way he's positioning X.AI, rightly or wrongly, which I think it makes sense, is that it's an answer to ChatGPT taking over the world and doing it wrong. X.AI will do it right and will be an alternative to this that does things right. And then we're going back to the battle of AI. Already, the narrative is becoming so quickly the battle of AIs for essentially what seems like world domination to replace God, which Fiji can geek out on.
Is OpenAI technically still open source, considering Microsoft's $10 billion investment? Is that a lot of ownership interest, or is it more of an acceleration because they want to use the technology?
It's not open. Their algorithm is not open. Like, it's called OpenAI. It's not open. It used to be, but it's not open.
Hold on.
My guess is that this is just a.
So before I understand, Elon, but just back to the thing. What do you mean it's not open? OpenAI is.
So it's not completely open. They don't know how it's doing what it's doing. And Wolfram just had a plugin for it, so it does maths better. But nobody's been allowed to see what's under the hood. So, yeah.
Look, if you by open you mean they're not opening up the weights to the model. Yeah, I mean it's not open.
Yep.
It's like you still get API access, and I think it's a good
API
question.
access is not open.
Yeah.
That's
agreed. Yeah, fair enough. But like I think it's also fair to say that these different models should be treated differently, right? Like Stable Diffusion, text to image models, having the weights open. Like I'm not too worried too much. I think we'll solve the synthetic like deepfake problem, synthetic misinformation problem, like waifu diffusion, whatever. But like I'm kind of happy GPT-4 with multimodal capabilities isn't like some open source thing. Like all the doom scenarios we were talking about that were even within like the next 1 to 2 years, that type of like the the misuse of like those type of multimodal models being open, I think like I totally understand why that's not the case, right? So but you almost have to dissect it and think about it. But hey, you're right. OpenAI ain't open anymore.
So when it started, and I'll be quick. So when it started, the aim was to have this different AI agents which are open and would fight the AIs that are bad. I mean, that's what I heard Elon saying in one of the I think talks that he gave. And I think when he left, things changed and it became closed. So it changed its original mission to become this. So I hope they change the name. It's like you have a gym and now it's a spa. So but the name remains the same.
So I went ahead and I used about $3 on my my Chat GPT API using AutoGPT to actually ask this question. I said, come up with me with the ideal occupation and skill set and industry for AI expertise and where you would take things, to that question you had there, Mario. And it actually finished last night. Came back with healthcare industry, medical image analysis using computer vision algorithms, predictive analytics, natural language processing, manufacturing industry. I'll post these to the Nest. I've got them in a tweet that's ready to go out. The finance industry, retail industry, transportation industry, education industry. It just went out and it looked at all the sort of search and research that it could find on this and kind of came back with, here are the types of things that you should go after. And I would say, if you're looking to really amp up your skill set on that, do what you're passionate about, right? Like there's so much energy right now if you want to get into the AI image generation space. Lots of incredible energy there. I know myself, I feel that too. My mom is a fantastic artist. I can't draw worth a darn. I've got a shaky hand, terrible handwriting, but she took me to every museum on the face of the earth. And as a kid, I just sucked that all in, but I had no output for that. And now I'm able to create images on the fly. That's why you guys see me sort of venturing into that space, because it's just this great creative output for me. And I'm passionate about that. But find what you're passionate about, find some industry that you know something about, and just start tackling it and figure out like what it is. This is the next wave of the internet, where you have the moment right now for any sort of expertise you have or don't have to get smart on it and just push it out there. But more importantly, just go ask ChatGPT. It's like, I've got this passion for this. How would I apply some AI occupation or opportunity to that?
I don't think I'd make it that simple, and I wouldn't call it the next wave of the internet or web, whatever. I think that's
maybe, but it feels that way because it's like this feels very much like this feels very much like
you're watching technology in forms of web, and that ages you instantly, Justin. I didn't know you had 8 kids, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
That's fucking crazy. I want to go to Alan, and then we'll go to AGI. But I think to think of this in terms of, okay, so for the audience, Web 2, right, was the ability to disseminate information kind of in a semi-trustless nature. Web 3 is trustless and decentralized. The idea that somehow AI is a form of that, I think, is a disservice to our audience. AI is
but it's not about that. It's about the democratization of it. Like I could go to my mom now and tell her, hey, go do this, right? She doesn't need to think. And like, she gets so frustrated over her Google searches. She's a boomer. And now she could use these tools to access things that she's been so frustrated about trying to find links with.
But that's why I'm trying to connect it through this entire space. I'm trying to connect it to blockchain, because it's the idea of sovereignty connected with tools that allow you to have access to more democratized and decentralized information in an empowering way rather than a disempowering way. And I think what everybody's fear is that it's disempowering. And I believe that the value is that it's empowering if you want to be empowered. So Justin, I'm going to go to Alan and then to AGI, but that's just my personal thoughts in terms of what we're creating. And those who don't absorb it are going to fall behind. And you're going to lose your jobs. And you're going to be rendered useless to a degree. But Alan, what's going on, brother?
Phygital, I couldn't agree more. And I just want to kind of jump on the back of what Black said, and Justin and Bilaiwal is so true. Is we're going to have to break a few eggs and make an omelet. But I want to kind of tie this up in a bow and say, like, just like how you guys are holding spaces about, the Restrict Act and all these kind of things, like we're all a part of this change. So I think, piggybacking off of what Black said about practical applications of how we can all address this is more of a mindset shift where, we're all creators of this future. So it's up to us to kind of chip in where we can, kind of piggyback on what Justin's saying, leverage your own strengths and utilize this thing to move forward. So